Hello, 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 everybody. This is the Transatlantic Call-In Show. Welcome to the line. This is the show where you call in and talk to trans people and get to ask us questions directly, whether you are an ally or if you are oppositional, if you have a problem with us. We are taking all callers. So I'm Luxander, hosting today. With me is Dr. Ben. How you doing, Ben? Haven't seen you in a bit.
Hello. It's been a hot minute because I've been working.
Mm-hmm.
Thankfully,
Yeah.
I'm still working. I know a lot of people are worried about the things coming down the pipeline from the DOJ and all that stuff. Luckily, there's a lot of legal stuff going on with that too. So it's as much of a waiting game as it is for me as it is for everybody else. But you know, we're still going strong. We're still proceeding as we have been. So
Yes,
but
and we
it's good
will
to
be
be back
talking
though.
about that in more detail later, because our polls for this week are going to address that. But since we are going to get into that more in a few minutes, I do want to talk about last week's poll really quick. I already gave my commentary on it last week, so I'll give you the opportunity to tune in on it. But we were discussing the idea of material fraud. Is a trans person committing material fraud by using a different gender marker than the one they were assigned at birth? So basically, we're asking this because someone in the Texas legislature proposed a law, which is unlikely to pass, but the proposed law was to make it material fraud, meaning like it's a crime that requires intent. Like not only does the information have to be false, but there has to be an intent to get something, like
Mhm.
getting money that you wouldn't otherwise get or getting a contract that you wouldn't otherwise get based on the fraudulent representation that you've made. So I think some people last week were a little confused about what that means. They thought maybe it was a typo or something. But yeah, so what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah. If that constitutes fraud just by, you know, telling somebody that your gender is different than your sex assigned at birth, then is going by a nickname also fraud because that's not your name assigned at birth? Does it go the same for like um you know, like if you get married and it takes a while for your name change paperwork to process, are you still not allowed to introduce yourself as Mrs. Blankety Blank? Like, how far do you take this? Because I don't think anybody is 100% in agreement with everything that's, you know, in legal writing. Um, like, I mean, it's something that you have to wonder, how far is this able to go? And of course, um, the people passing these, like, or recommending like these actions don't actually care. Like, they don't really care how far it goes because it's, of course, usually cis men who are at the forefront of these things, and they're like cis het white men of upper classes. So the people who are in positions of power are the last people to be affected by any of this. So they don't give a shit. So
Yeah.
any of our objections, uh, just like they don't matter to them, and so that's why they have no problem passing this stuff. But hopefully, it'll get, you know, stopped in court. I don't predict that this will be. I say predict because I don't know. We've been surprised before, but
Yeah. I
yeah,
feel that my predictive powers have really fallen off recently.
yeah.
Like
There's actually
everything
been
that I
some
expect to happen doesn't
surprising.
happen.
Yeah, it's like there's even been some surprising things more in our favor, in
Sure.
certain ways. So it's, yeah, I think this is a horrendous thing that they're trying to do, and it's definitely like there's a point to, and I'll mention this in the today's poll as well, but there's a sense of how much of this is actual like intent to be enforced and how much of it is performative and wanting to seem like they're putting the hammer on trans people. And that much I don't know. And I guess we'll see how much they're willing to fight for it. But I think
Yeah.
it's absolutely garbage.
And a lot of these executive orders are not like changing the law. In fact, they state in the
Yeah.
executive orders, like in like to the extent that it is applicable by current law. Um, so a lot of those things, like it's not really changing anything, but I think it is sort of testing the waters on what they can do and seeing if they can get people to comply before the law even really truly takes effect.
Yeah.
Something I did want to mention about this too is that people change their gender markers through a legal process. Like I had to have a doctor sign off to say officially I have changed my sex materially such to justify a gender marker change on my license. And then I had
Mhm.
to send that to the DMV, the Department of Revenue, and they had to confirm that I was permitted to change my gender marker. That was the process in Kansas back when I was able to change it there. So in the same way that when California briefly legalized gay marriage and then it was illegal again and then it became legal again, the people who got married during that initial brief period, their marriages were not annulled when it became illegal to process those requests
Yeah.
again. So, like, this is the same thing. How could it possibly be material fraud if I changed my gender marker or sex marker, however you want to say it, via a legal process? And, sometimes you even have to go to court to have this
Mhm.
confirmed. And the whole point of that process is to prevent people from doing this for a fraudulent reason. So there is a kind of an assumption in the courts that like if you seek this kind of change, then you're doing it because like you are honest in your declaration. Like otherwise it would be perjury. So yeah, there are already checks and balances on this kind of thing. So it's very frustrating when folks are like, "Yeah, but we're going to say that this is fraud now." All right, cool.
Yeah.
And like it's a serious crime. And I do want to also say that unfortunately, it would not surprise me if this type of thing became more common where because I've seen it recently and I can't remember what it was specifically, but there was some law where it's like uh I think it was something about like public decency or something where you have to be lewd and with the intention of being lewd rather than like, because you can be topless in a lot of places, for example, without it being like a crime because you have to have intent to be lascivious. But they're creating these laws now where it's like a trans person doing the same thing doesn't need to have that second. Intent is important in the legal process,
Mhm.
basically. So, anyway, that all to say, trans people are being treated differently under the law when these things start to pass. And we are not making up bullshit, as some people said, like, ooh, you're just baiting us with a really obvious question. Like, well, don't get mad at us. Get mad at what's his face in the Texas legislature because this is what they're trying to do right now. And if you think that's ridiculous, then maybe you should call someone about that. So that's all I got to say about it. Do you want to add anything else before we get going?
Nope, I think we covered it.
Cool. All right. So this week's poll, we're not going to get into right now. We're just going to get it started for the discussion. You all in the comments or in the chat here now, please respond to the post in the live chat as well, because Arden is putting that up for you. And you can tell us, did you know that Nazi Germany purged their Jewish military personnel in the lead up to the Holocaust? We are asking for a specific reason. Let me know if you had heard about this before or not. And if you want to add any additional comments, please go to the community posts page and leave your comments there on the post and we will read them. So with that said, I think we're ready for callers. Is it time? Is it time? Already.
Yeah, it's
Already time
time.
for callers. If you didn't know, there is a number on the screen, and I will read it to you right now as well. I am not fully set up here. There we go. So if you want to call in, we do still have a couple of open lines. The number is 720-619-2288, or you can click the web caller in the description if for some reason doing it over the phone doesn't work for you. So with all that said, please call in if you have anything interesting you'd like us to discuss. And as far as I'm concerned, we can just take them in the order that they've come. Does that work for you?
Yeah, that's fine with me.
All right. So we're bringing back Aleph, who called in last week. He, him pronouns from Georgia, talking about how sex and gender are the same thing, wants to continue our discussion from last week. Aleph, you are live on the line. How's it going?
It's going good, Lux and Dr. Ben. How are you guys doing today?
Pretty
Doing
good
all
so far.
right.
All right. What did you want to pick up on
Awesome.
from our conversation last week?
Josie, she said I should call back in and talk about gender and sex are being the same thing. You know, my position is that they're the same. I guess she was suggesting that you guys have understanding that they're different and probably going to relay that to me.
Yeah, if I recall correctly, I just want to make sure your initial call was about like being concerned about kids transitioning and then you basically have this position like it's okay for adults to do it. I'm concerned about kids doing it. And kind of underlying that belief is a belief that sex and gender are the same thing and that you can't really change them. Is that right?
Right.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. I just want to make sure we've established so we know what we're talking about now. So basically, like the conversation that we'd like to have today is discussing like the difference between sex and gender and how like can you actually change these things, I guess. So I guess I would ask you like how do you define like what is let's start with the classic. What is a woman? Like I want to let you lay out your beliefs here, Aleph.
Yep.
Okay. So like I said last week, the definition I use for a woman is adult female. The definition I use for a man is adult male. I understand that people use like there are multiple definitions for many words, and that woman and man wouldn't be excluded from having multiple definitions. But I don't think anyone was using those definitions, for example, when they made men's sports and women's sports. I don't think they made it
Yeah.
based off of the other definitions. Right. I think they made women's sports and men's sports based off of the definition that is sex, for example.
Yeah, so let me ask you a question there. So here's my question for you. Define female.
Define female?
Yep, define female. What
I
do you
would
use to
define it
include
in
somebody in the female category? Sorry, go ahead.
I would start with, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. There's probably a delay. I would start with the potential to give birth to offspring. I would start there.
Okay.
Like,
okay. So is that
human who has
requirement?
The potential?
Is that feature in itself? If someone had the capability to do that, would that make them a woman?
You said if someone had the capability to do that, would that make them a woman?
If someone has the capability to give birth, does that make them a woman?
Yeah, I would say the potential to give birth, but if they absolutely have the ability to give birth, yeah, absolutely, that makes them a woman by the definition I'm using. Yeah.
So we'll get into the fact that I'm sure you're aware that not all women can give birth, but we can get to that scenario next. Are the traits required to give birth, like to have an unassisted pregnancy, to term, and deliver a baby, are all those traits consistent among all people who can deliver a baby? Do you know what traits are involved in that?
There's always medical complications as to why a woman, why a female wouldn't necessarily be able to give birth. But
I'm saying ones that can.
Someone who has the potential.
But someone who can. So let's say, can a person who is XY, who gives birth to a baby, is that person a woman by your definition?
By my definition, yes. If you're an adult male mammal, adult female mammal of the human species, then yeah, by that definition, you would be a woman. You're giving birth.
Okay, so you can have traits that would ordinarily be assigned in the male category. You can have male traits and still be a woman. You can be XY and be a woman, correct?
Yeah, like if you're born that way, yeah.
Okay, so the traits.
I don't know of any. I don't know of any person. When you say traits, what are you saying? Are you saying like
so chromosomes,
visual traits,
hormones,
like they have
anatomical
an XY
features,
chromosome?
Yeah. So tell me what are all the So and I know you're saying that you don't know any people that fit that definition, but there are published case reports of people who had no idea that they were XY and who were assigned female at birth. So they have a completely intact and functional female reproductive system, but they have XY. And this person actually didn't, one of the people I'm talking about, didn't even have an SRY translocation. So the gene that people look at to say this causes the male pathway to happen, this person didn't have a mutation in that particular pathway. It was a separate gene. where there was a mutation. But that person had no idea she was XY until her child was karyotyped and found to be XY. So she had an unassisted pregnancy to term, delivered the baby, and then didn't know until her baby was tested. So that person sounds like would be a woman in your mind. So where I'm going with this is that if we limit and reduce our definition of woman to adult female, it begs the question of what do you mean by female? Because most people would think, oh, female means XX chromosomes. It means uterus, means vagina, means labia, means breasts. Like you have an idea of what all the traits should agree on when you think of female. However, we look at reality, and that's not necessarily the case. We have so many people along the spectrum who most people wouldn't bat an eye at to say that person's a woman. So I think it's reductionist to use the term female as part of the definition for woman and not expand on what we precisely mean by that. Does that make sense? So I'm just trying to gather what in your definition includes people. So what are your inclusion criteria? What makes somebody a woman? And what excludes somebody from being a woman? And so we gathered that one trait is being able to, as you're saying, the potential to birth a child. And so we have some exceptions there where people have that capability that have male characteristics. What are some other traits that would include you in the group of womanhood? And what are some traits that would exclude you from the group of womanhood?
So the way in which the definition works best for me is based off of the reproduction organs. For the example that you gave, this woman who, because of her reproductive organs, was believed to be a woman, that no one tested this person genetically to see if they had XY chromosomes. We just assumed based off of them having the potential to perceive or the potential to give birth, and they actually gave birth.
So what about somebody?
That's what we would classify as a woman.
See, this is where I'm trying to walk you through this, because it sounds like you don't have a good understanding of the complexity of biology and biological sex. So, like, you have
I have a good enough understanding to say that there are intersex people, right?
Okay, so would you agree that sex is not binary? Will you at least go to that point?
I would say in the production of offspring, sex is very binary. There's not a lot.
No, it's not.
It is not. You just said that you agree that intersex people exist. So if there is a binary, a strict binary means either one or the other, no matter what. So if there is such a thing as an intersex person, then it is not possible to say that sex is binary. It is literally you have defeated that statement. You can't hold both positions at the same time.
I hear you, Lux. And what I'm saying is that they either fall into the category of being able to give birth or get someone pregnant. There's no cases that I found unless.
Aleph, listen to me. Aleph.
Unless you have a case.
People okay, let me ask, do all people have gametes?
No, not all people. I don't think so.
Okay, so there are some people who do not have either capability to get someone pregnant or to get pregnant. So what I'm trying to get you to understand is you cannot limit womanhood to one criterion, because you're inevitably going to include people that you wouldn't normally include, and you're going to exclude people that you normally wouldn't exclude. So if you say that womanhood is limited to reproductive potential, people that have XX chromosomes, who have a uterus, have a vagina, have breast tissue that is a female phenotype, there are people in that group who do not produce gametes on their own, and therefore would be excluded from your definition of woman. So you have to take in multiple factors in order to have a coherent definition. And so what you're going to end up having to do with your argument,
because they didn't have gametes stuff.
So then, but the problem is you're using reproductive potential. You said you said the statement that everyone either can get pregnant, either has the potential to get pregnant or get someone else pregnant, which is demonstrably not true. And with that, you are going to have to move the goalpost, because if you say, okay, this criterion is required for womanhood, and then you say, oh no, but there's another thing for people who don't have that possibility, there's this other thing. Well, so now you said that this is not required, this trait is not required to include you into that pool. So your definition cannot be coherent using one factor as a metric for who gets to be a woman and who doesn't. Right?
So no. So what I'm saying is that if you're born in such a way that you have the reproductive organs of either a female or a male, generally speaking, you fall into.
What if you have both? What if you have both sets of reproductive organs and no gametes?
So you end up
What's your gender?
You end up being called an intersex person, right? And then,
Yeah. But what is that
that's
socially?
more closer to a defect.
So what is that gender? Because your claim, your claim is that gender and sex are the same. So are you saying that people can be assigned non-binary and exist in our society as non-binary because it aligns with their sex?
What I'm saying is that when some people are going to be born with birth defects of some kind, and I'm not going to make a gender for every single defect that a person could have. Like that wouldn't make sense.
We don't do that either. That's why we say non-binary. That's why we say intersex. We have a category that is the other. Everyone that does not fit into these other categories, right? It's not overly complicated, and you don't need to make it overly complicated, but you also don't need to reduce it to one trait, because then you eliminate a good high percentage of the population. Because then at that point, like if you've had a hysterectomy, are you a woman anymore, or did you forfeit your womanhood? Like you have to, if you're going to stick with a definition, a biological definition of womanhood, you have to make it coherent, and you're failing to do that.
I don't see where I'm failing to do that. It was because what you're saying is that the women or the people who fall into intersex just aren't women. But that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying they lack the ability.
Your perspective, based on what you've said, has to arrive at that conclusion. My perspective is that gender and sex are separate, so your gender identity is not dependent on any of your biological features, and you can have all of those, any combination of these traits existing simultaneously and still be a woman. That's where I'm getting at. And your definition is more restricted. So if you're going to exclude more people, you have to demonstrate that. You can't just lean on a fantasy hypothetical that you think is real and then just ignore all of the exceptions. You have to engage with the exceptions. And if you're going to say that your identity has to match your sex, then you have to give demonstration that you can, in fact, include everybody in that.
Yeah, but there's so again, no one is saying people who are born with male reproductive organs can go into when you're looking at it like this, where we are dividing it up. When like in an elementary school, the boys go into the boys' bathroom, and what we mean by boys is if you have male reproductive organs. If you go into the boys' bathroom,
but this is different.
You shouldn't be going into the girls' bathroom.
But
hang on. Let me finish the statement real quick.
Nope.
I want to make this point.
No, absolutely the fuck not. You're going to listen to me. Do you understand that reproductive potential, and by that I'm assuming you mean gametes, is a separate developmental process than genitalia? Right? Your assigned sex is based on your genitalia. Most often your observed external genitalia, because we don't really ultrasound or CT scan people like at birth. We don't know often what their internal genitals are. We know their external genitals, and that's how people are assigned. Do you understand that that is different than somebody's reproductive potential?
Yes, but the reproductive potential starts at the reproductive organ first.
No, so you are not, no, because they are different. They are different developmental processes. Like they originate from different tissues. They have different responses to hormones. They have different genetic components that cause them to develop. So you can have a mismatch in your external and internal anatomy. You can have an internal female tract and an external male tract, and you could have an absence of gametes, or you could have opposite gametes. You could have both sets of gametes. So there's combinations that you clearly are not accounting for, because I think you don't understand what you're actually implying by this, and I think you're relying on a lower level of education than you think you have. So, not to be too pedantic, but
what I'm saying is that if you're born with an external male, if you're born with an external male genitalia but an internal female gametes, the internal lining tract, can that person get pregnant and birth a baby through the penis now? I'm asking
that
a
is
serious
kind
question.
of a ridiculous hypothetical, because theoretically, yes. Well, you're not gonna, that's a whole different thing of whether or not a baby could survive coming out of a penis. That's totally irrelevant to the reproductive potential, because let's say that could happen. Hypothetically, if somebody had an internal tract and they had an internal female reproductive tract, and you did IVF and you implanted an embryo into that uterus, you could cesarean delivery that baby. Like you could get that baby out. You could have a viable gestation, a viable term infant. So your hypothetical doesn't even do anything for this situation. What I'm trying to delineate is that there is a difference between reproductive potential, which you said is your criterion, and your external anatomy, which is how people are assigned. And so you have to now deal with this mismatch. When someone has that mismatch, what do we do? How do we assign them? What gender do they get to be?
The external the external expression,
so it's not,
is probably
so
what
it's
I
not
meant
about their gametes. So it's not about their reproductive potential. It's not about their gametes. It's about their external genitalia.
right.
So what if somebody has,
that's where reproductive gametes, I mean, that's where we look at your
think
reproductive potential first.
did you listen to me? Did you listen to me at all? Or are you just so incompetent that you don't understand where I'm going with this? Did you not understand that these are separate?
You don't have to insult me. That's not necessary.
Then why aren't you listening? If you're smart enough to understand it, why aren't you listening to it?
I don't know what part you don't think I'm listening to. I heard you.
Because I clarified the difference,
maybe I mean the external.
And you keep saying that every time you say the external anatomy like is required or relates to reproductive potential, and I keep telling you that no, that is not true, and you keep saying yes, it is. So unless you'd like to provide citations to prove me wrong, you can very kindly shut the fuck up about that and proceed with the argument with the clarifications that we've added. Or you can concede your argument.
Ad hominems don't necessarily help.
Well, that wasn't
my argument was simple. You
don't even know what an ad hominem is. You don't know what an ad hominem is, because I didn't say that your argument is bad because you're stupid. I said that you're not listening and you don't understand what you're saying. That is not me discrediting your argument because of your intelligence level, right? That is a separate comment. That's not an ad hominem fallacy.
So an ad hominem also covers just attacking a person instead of just staying focused on the argument.
No, it's a logical fact. Hold on, I need to jump in here. Ben, thank you so much for all of your commentary. I want to jump in here and kind of try to bring things back. I just want to state a logical fallacy is when you use, like, an ad hominem means that you're discrediting someone's argument because of something that is insulting about them. Like, you're stupid and therefore your argument is wrong, and not your argument is wrong and also you're stupid. Like, those are two different things. He's not calling you stupid, to be clear. He's calling you uninformed, which I believe that. So what we're kind of running into here is that, Aleph, your definition is, you've asserted a definition, but then you're willing to be flexible about the definition. And that's what we're trying to drive toward, is like you originally stated, my definition is based on their reproductive capability. So, like, are they actually capable, potentially, of having a baby or getting someone pregnant, right? But then what Ben is saying is that, like, sometimes the external visual genitalia doesn't match the internal. And the more common thing, like the example that we would actually see, is like someone has a vagina externally. So when they're born, we think, oh, that's a girl. But then they grow up and it turns out that they have testicles inside their body instead of ovaries. Like, that is a fairly common form of intersex condition. So, like, that person is neither capable of getting pregnant nor of impregnating anyone else, because the sperm doesn't have a delivery system in that case. So, like, if you are willing to say that a person, like, so basically you're saying like if the person is externally has a vagina, then that means that they're a woman, but that is running counter to your originally stated position that it is their reproductive capability, because that person who has testicles instead of ovaries is not capable of either thing. So if you are willing to say that like that person can be a woman, then you need to change how you're defining woman to something other than strictly their reproductive capability. And where this conversation ends up is in a place where we have to acknowledge that a lot of variation naturally exists, that we still grant women who are infertile, like we say you're a woman still, because it's who they are as a human person, and not like strictly a description of whether they are capable of doing that physical task. Like, does that make sense?
I agree with you, Love. I
So
do,
you are
and I
willing to
was
say that sex and gender
rescinding
are
my
different.
initially. Well, no, not that far. Where I was willing to go was I was saying that with the new information that Ben gave me that covers potential to give birth or get pregnant is not the external line, right? He explained that to me, right? And what I'm saying is that I would
Right.
concede from the potential to the external because that's what we were basing it off of. And I was ignorant in that fact of saying that we were basing it off of your potential. We weren't. We were basing it off of the external
Okay.
factor of what could lead to
Okay.
a potential that you probably wouldn't find till later.
Right. So we're
But there
moving
are
the
people
goalposts.
who, yeah, we have moved the
Yeah.
goalposts, which is I think a way of coming to a good understanding is being willing to change your mind and come back from the indefensible position that you originally had. I think that's a good thing. What if a person is born with a micropenis and a vagina that is only 2 inches deep? Like, what is that person's reproductive capability? Or like, how are we defining that person based on their external genitalia? Does that person, do we assign them non-binary at birth, or do we do what we actually do currently, which is surgically remove the micropenis and then say that's a woman and that's a female, and we just kind of like change their bodies without permission? Like, what would you say that person is?
I would go with what we currently do now, which is the doctors make a medical decision on which one to pick
So
because we're not
non-consensually
That's
supposed to
altering
be
the
not.
born with
genitals of
both.
children, which
Is
is
it that?
something that
Except
all of you people are so
that's.
opposed to. You people are so
Yeah.
opposed to children
And we're
getting this
phasing
medical
that
care,
out.
but you are pro mutilating a child who is a baby, who has no decision-making process, no consultation with psychologists or anything. This is like so deeply offensive to me. I
Well,
can't even
Yeah.
explain it to
And
you.
it,
I
and
would
it's not the
I
doctor
would
that
do
picks
it. I
Aleph.
would.
So in the most recent like all of that is phasing out. But for the people that still believe that's the best course of action, or in states that allow that, it's not the doctor that picks, it's the parents that pick. The parents get to
Mhm.
pick whichever one they want. And oftentimes they choose to make the person female simply because it's easier to dig a hole and build a pole in a lot of cases. They're getting better at like phalloplasty and things, but like that's why it's been historically done. It's not been even necessarily because they have a majority of one trait or of another. It's what's like the easiest thing to assign them as. So does that make sense? Like it's not a great idea. And I'll let you respond to Lex's point, and then I have another point to launch from.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that we would do that. We would the children wouldn't have a situation if they had cancer, and we would go against their will for removing cancer,
That's different.
and
That's
that wouldn't
different.
be a
Not comparable at
violation of
all.
That's
that
different.
child. Well,
So
There
Alex,
is
it's
hang
nothing
on.
different.
medically
I
wrong with
just
a
wanted
child
to.
who
It's
has
different.
ambiguous genitalia.
The only reason to medically intervene for an intersex child is if there is a medical complication that is life-threatening or health-threatening, and those typically being related to certain like sex abnormalities related to adrenal gland function, because your adrenals are responsible for a lot of androgen production, but also responsible for cortisol and aldosterone. So you have issues with maintaining your blood pressure and fighting off infections and all that stuff. So people with congenital adrenal hyperplasia actually do have a medical reason to give them medical therapy to suppress androgens and to, like fix whatever internal processes are going on that are life-threatening. But it's not to fix their sex presentation. It's to fix their water loss and their immunocompromise, right? So we don't do it. It's not done for cosmesis. The evidence-based guidelines now are to if there's no medical complication, let that child grow until they get to a point where they can consent themselves, or like where they can have a conversation with their parents and make a decision for that child for what they want to do. It's not evidence-based. It is not ethical to violate their consent in that way. You comparing it to cancer is different because that is about life-saving, health-saving measures. These are different. Do you understand that?
I do. My question is what gender would you give that person who was born with both genitalia?
Yeah. So that's my position. Our position is that sex and gender are different. That child biologically would be intersex, but their gender is how they identify. That is for them to learn about themselves, to grow up, engage with society, and figure themselves out. Like all of us go through development with our own gender identity. There are a lot of things that are kind of forced upon us and we're socialized into, but it's the same way anybody else should learn their gender. It's a process for you to learn on your own. It does not need to be forced upon you. And so I don't need to put these people in a particular box. It does not matter to me whether they call themselves non-binary from birth or if they call themselves male or female. Their gender identity is inconsequential to me, except for in that I can support them in whatever way I can. That is why, like one of the many reasons why separating sex and gender is the appropriate thing to do. It allows you to differentiate like that. Your position requires them to be in alignment, and that's where you're having some more of these ethical issues. It's more ethically sticky to be in your position than it is ours.
Well, not right now for me. Not when I look at it. It just sounds like you're talking about an exception. So I'm going to say
well,
this.
No, it's not. It's not
like
ethically.
Let
me clarify. It doesn't matter as much for your position right now because you're not an authority to make these decisions for other people, and nor would I want you to ever make these decisions for other people, especially with how uninformed you are about the issue. But either way, I don't think your opinion should matter in these people's healthcare. But either way, it would be nice if you would, consider the evidence and consider the fact that you don't need to have this very rigid view of a congruent sex and gender like being the same thing. I think you're so hell-bent on them having to be the same, and this is where you're ending up in these weird traps. And yes, it is ethically sticky for you because this relates to how you treat other people. This relates to how you advocate. Like, I don't know if you have children or if you plan on having children, but this impacts how you could treat your child, what unnecessary procedures you could have done to your child that could actually harm them long term. The lack of education here is important, and this is why we engage with it. And I'm not trying to be mean, but this issue is very, very important. And I don't know if you understand how important it is to get this right and not as important to stick to your guns on something. Would you rather be correct long term and do the right thing medically for people, the right thing socially for people, or would you rather feel like you're right in your stance and feel like you didn't have to learn anything new?
No, so I can concede that there are more than what you would call two genders, right? So there will be non-binary. Your definition of non-binary is the first version of this definition I've heard, and I would agree that that would be a gender because you're talking about someone who is otherwise healthy who actually fits into a definition of being non-binary. I do plan on having children. I do not have any children. What I'm saying is that in the situation in which I have a child, if I had a non-binary child, it would have been the first time if I had this conversation, a doctor would explain that option to me, and hopefully I would have been flexible enough to understand what they were saying and not choose to, what did you say, pole or dig a hole. I kept both. Um, the problem would come into place would be where I have a healthy child that you're then saying I can say that his gender is flexible, like a child who is a non-binary. That's why a
I would like to ask a
non-binary
question.
gender child would be flexible.
I would like to ask a question here. So, let's say you have a
Uh-huh.
child who's born with the ambiguous genitalia, and you would say, I'm going to say that child is non binary as their gender. If that kid grows up and they're like 3 or 4 years old and they say, Daddy, I'm a boy, are you going to say, no, you're non binary?
That's a very good question.
Yeah. Because the question is like, are we
Probably.
defining people solely by their sexual characteristics? Would you tell your kid that, like, that socially it would be easier for that child to be known as a boy? And like, are you about to tell every single person that like, yeah, my child is non-binary. I only use they, them pronouns because this is the freakish genital situation that they have going on. Like I just don't know if you understand the implications of that. And like that is what we're doing with trans kids. Like they're born with a certain genitalia and then we tell them who they are based on that, but then they decide that it's different a couple years later. So like I'm asking that question, like you are willing to accept that there is a trinary if we're basing it exclusively on sex characteristics. Basically, you're still saying sex and gender are the same thing, but I accept that it's trinary instead of binary. But yeah, like what would you do if you had an intersex kid who said, I'm a boy? Would you not let them cut their hair? Would you not let them dress like a boy and go by a boy's name? Would you force them to be non-binary?
No, I think in a situation like that, I would probably, like I told you guys last time, Lux. I told you guys I would probably seek help from the professionals in that field, right?
Yeah. Do you think it would be cruel
So
to
I
force
would.
that child to be non-binary?
So I think it would be cruel for that child to be non-binary.
If you were
No, to force
so
them.
let's say like if the child says I'm a boy and you say no, you're non-binary and I will not let you cut your hair. I will not let you do these things. Everyone is going to know what genitals you have when we introduce you to somebody. Do you think that would be cruel to a child?
Yeah, I mean, my goal, I wouldn't do that to my child. No,
So why is it different for
and
trans
I
kids?
think
Why
that
is it
would be cruel
acceptable for trans kids? Why is it not cruel to trans kids?
because they weren't born in that unique way. So they weren't born in such a way that they
But
are
your child
binary,
was not born
and
a
it's going to be
boy.
a little
But
bit
in this, no,
more.
shut up. Hold on. In this hypothetical, your child was not born a boy.
They were
Why
born
are
in
you
a very
allowing them to?
complicated manner.
Right. It turns out that trans people are all born in a very complicated manner because our understanding of ourselves is different to our sex. So your child who identifies as a boy but is biologically intersex, if you're okay with that child being a boy and getting them the procedures that they need and letting them cut their hair, then you are transphobically, ideologically inconsistent if you think that it's appropriate to force kids who are trans to go through with like the wrong form of puberty. I mean, you won't let them cut their hair and stuff. Like this is what we mean when we say that people are transphobic, is because you're applying a different standard for trans kids because you have arbitrarily decided that certain kids get to be validated and other ones don't.
No, look. So, like I told you last week, when it comes down to that, it that's where the uncertainties come in. At is how is my otherwise healthy son identifying to be a girl? Because it can't just be because
So
he wants to dress
But the
up
non-binary
as
kid is healthy. The non-binary,
Aleph.
let's say the intersex kid is totally healthy. Why would you let that kid get like procedures and you wouldn't let a trans kid get procedures? Like I'm saying that the intersex kid is
because
healthy. There is no cancer, there's no nothing.
as a non-binary, they have both genitalia, and they could identify as a female. They could identify as a male, or was that not necessarily? I'm sorry, I said that wrong. They are
Aleph,
intersex,
but here,
right?
the point is, there are exceptions to the rule you are trying to establish. We have very concrete examples, as we've mentioned, of biological exceptions to this rule, right? What I'm trying to get you to understand here is trans people are also an exception to that rule. And so you need to also treat them like an exception. So even if you want to say that, like, if you want to say that you would go through all these lengths for your non-binary child who was born in a biologically complex manner, like trans people, like Lux was saying, are also in a similar boat where there's some uncertainty. Like there's a lot we don't know about the origin of the trait of being transgender, like transgender identities. We don't know a lot about how this comes to be, and there's like certain utility or not to actually, investigating that further. But the point is, like, these people have a mismatch in the same way that people who are intersex have a mismatch. There's something within this algorithm that is all supposed to theoretically end up at the same place, but people end up in very different combinations. This is another one of those different combinations, and we have to decide what to do with this. And so there's been like a lot of study. There's been hundreds and thousands of papers out there addressing, what is the best evidence going forward? How do we promote like health in this particular population? How do we reduce harm and increase benefits within this population? And there have been people who have tried, like, over and over again, conversion therapy. They've tried that to assign people to their sex assigned at birth and to make them live that way. And it's continuously produced poor outcomes, and devastatingly poor outcomes. And so to say that you have, like, and yeah, these people are often physiologically healthy people. And it's not necessarily it's not the trans identity that puts them at higher risk. It's societal interactions, it's oppression, it's discrimination, it's being written out of legislation, it's people making their lives harder is what drives people to poor outcomes. It's telling them that they cannot exist as the person that they are, and that they would rather not be alive than have to live as someone they're not. And that's something that really everyone, if you, Aleph, I don't know how you would feel if you were forced to live as a woman, but would you rather live in a world where you had to live as the opposite gender without your consent? Would that be manageable for you?
No, I mean, but
Right.
that
So
doesn't
that's what we're
that
dealing with.
doesn't.
So that's what we're dealing with trans people. The data over and over and over again shows that people have reduction of symptoms. They're oftentimes, and a lot of people, gender dysphoria goes away when they are affirmed, when they are given gender affirming care. And it's completely opposite outcomes to when you force an identity on somebody. And so this is why, like,
I'm sorry, Dr.
we
Ben.
can't pinpoint it. No, listen, we can't pinpoint it as physically as we can with that intersex example we gave you. But it is the same concept. There's still a mismatch. We are managing the mismatch, and we have learned that we need, like, the body side of it, the anatomical side of it is secondary to their identity. And we can manage these things separately, and we can manage them well with gender affirming care and with affirmation.
And I agree with you, Dr. Ben, when you say that the literature is very clear on gender affirmation, or that the gender affirming care does help significantly better than the conversion. My question is, like, well, my problem comes into place is poisoning the well, telling a child that they have, telling a child that is, children are more intelligent than a lot of people give them credit for, but they're still susceptible to believing in fake things and things that
But
aren't
that's
real.
not what's happening.
You can
We,
tell
we
them.
talked about this last time, though.
Well,
We talked about this last time with Josie.
right,
Josie
right,
explained to you that we go through a lengthy process where there are child psychologists who are experts in figuring out whether a child is expressing imagination or whether a child is expressing a true belief about themselves. There's nobody out here telling children what they are. The whole point of this, and you just said it, children are more
no.
intelligent than we give them credit for. Children are capable of
The only
seeing groups and patterns and where they fit within those groups and patterns.
the only people
So
telling
what
children
I'm
who
saying
they
is
have
that
to be are people who oppose trans rights and the people who oppose them deciding their own gender identity. It's opposite. So your
no,
perspective, your side are the people that are imposing identities on people
To the
and
extent
telling
that you will
them what to
surgically
be.
alter
no, I'm
babies
not.
and you think
Yeah.
that's okay.
I'm not opposing identities on the people. What I'm saying is that I wouldn't bring up the idea that my son is a girl because he wants to dress up as a princess. I never mentioned that he
And
might
we're
be a
not
And
girl
saying
nobody's
that
doing
you
to my
that.
should.
son because that'll be
That's not how people come to terms with their gender identity. And and no,
and that's why
you
I
should
agree
not.
that
You should
adults
not.
have
No,
the ability to
you should
choose.
not assume that your child
And
is
then
any gender based on their expression. That what happens is your kid comes to terms with who they are. They grow up like and they start hitting toddlerhood, or even if they come to terms with it later on, they arrive at that conclusion on their own. That's something that they develop. Like you have a strong internal sense of gender. At least most people do. Not everybody has a strong sense of gender at all. There are people who do not identify with gender. Period. But most people will have um, like a strong sense of their internal sense of gender around toddlerhood, and they will bring it up. Or if they don't, it may be because their environment is so oppressive that they don't feel safe to do so. And that's something that also should not happen. But I think what happens a lot of the time when people oppose um, like gender affirming care for minors, or even like consideration of gender diversity in minors, it's because you're approaching it with this archaic cishet lens of how cis people treat other people. Like your cultural norms are not the same cultural norms in the trans community, in the LGBTQ community, because we've acknowledged that a lot of that stuff is archaic and barbaric, and we don't encourage pressuring people to have a certain identity or not. That is a product of cishet society. So if you're going to look at it, if you're going to pass any judgment at all on transition issues, you need to step out of your own perspective and look at it like with a trans an LGBTQ cultural perspective, right? It's like looking in at like a totally different like culture around the world. Like you can't say you can't imply that somebody else is doing something in the way that Americans do it just because that's how you do it, right? It's the same thing with these subcultures. So I think you need to learn more about what actually happens and stop listening to people who have no idea what the fuck they're talking about. Because there's misunderstanding and there's clearly misinformation that you've been believing. You need to go listen to people who have the knowledge, who have the expertise in that cultural setting and in that medical field, in that field of psychology, sociology. There are perspectives that you're missing, and clearly so. So I
with the
think
perspective, the perspectives that are missing are not
yeah,
the scientific literature doesn't have an understanding for where
we
it
have a better
comes into
understanding than you
play.
do, Aleph.
Where
We have a better understanding than you
no,
do.
what I'm saying is that
Clearly,
what I'm saying is that they don't have an answer for it. They don't have an answer for what
we don't
makes a
we don't
person
have a
identify
100% answer
as the
for
opposite
anything
sex
on
to
this
the
planet.
degree.
We don't have an
What my
answer for
question?
really
So
anything to
that's
that
where
degree
the
that you expect.
so that's what I was talking about last week when I said that uncertainty is why it sounds like you're saying don't treat
Uncertainty,
my son as a boy. It's like you're saying don't treat my son as
uncertainty
a boy.
is
Treat my
not
son
as
as a
much a part of this.
non-binary.
Uncertainty is not as big of a measure as you think it is. And it, again, this is another thing where I can tell that you don't practice medicine. or any kind of clinical field, because there is always a degree of uncertainty. There always will be. You can't just forego any decision making because of fear of uncertainty, because nothing will get done ever. You have to use the evidence you have to make the best decision with the information in front of you. Or if you don't have information in front of you, you have to gather it. And you reach a point where you've gathered enough information to make a decision. And when you've reached that point, you make the decision and you reevaluate as you go on. But to say that that the evidence we have now is essentially nothing is completely absurd. To say that people who have never studied this issue are somehow more knowledgeable in the subject than people who actually have put in the work and have collected the data and synthesized their conclusions, that somehow that's still not a step in the direction. Like, and that I'm confused about what you think the standard of evidence should be and what your side has in terms of that standard of evidence.
Well, I wouldn't say, I wouldn't necessarily say my side. I wouldn't say my side. I lean more not to follow the masses because I'm atheist agnostic, so I already don't follow the masses in one large area. What I'm suggesting, what I'm saying is that because of those uncertainties, if I were to have a son, this is the distinguishment in which for adults to children, which is what I have when it comes down to making these type of decisions and these type of arguments. I agree that all adults have the free will to do whatever it is they want. But
as you keep talking, it's clear that you are not informed on the subject. So of course you have uncertainty about this because you don't know jack shit about the issue. So how we fix this, instead of complaining about other people.
But I do understand that though.
Here's the thing, and maybe this is where we need to wrap up because I'm getting frustrated, is the fact that instead of complaining about the people who are doing the work and who have data to back up their claims, instead of complaining about them for not answering your uncertainty enough when you haven't done any sufficient studying, is maybe address that point. Address what your knowledge gaps are and fill those in before you claim that other people have knowledge gaps that are too big to answer your question. Right? So I think you have some homework to do.
Why do you think that I have knowledge gaps? Or why do you think that I haven't done the research? I have done research.
Children. I want to be clear here. Yeah. You say that there's uncertainty around whether we should let children access this care because maybe they'll change their mind. Medically, there is no uncertainty about this. That's why we go through a process where the kids have to meet.
That's not what I'm saying.
No, Aleph, I really do not like being interrupted. I'm sorry. I know that we interrupt you. Sometimes it's our show and it's a power dynamic, and I'm sorry. Sometimes we get to keep talking and you don't get to keep talking. My problem here is man, I'm fucking ADHD, so now I don't know what I was trying to say. Anyway, there is no uncertainty medically. You are stating that you are uncertain that it's a good idea to let a kid transition. Medically, there is no uncertainty. So when Ben says you're talking out of your ass, he means you are not informed. If all of the medical people agree that transition is the correct thing to do for these kids, and that the correct thing to do also is to screen them rigorously and make sure that they're consistent, then yeah, like that's what we said last time. They go through years of psychological assessment. They have multiple doctors involved typically. The parents are always involved because you cannot get this care without parental consent. So like there is no medical uncertainty. There is no scientific uncertainty around whether it's good for trans kids to get this care. It is just with no doubt whatsoever always a good thing to affirm a child, at least initially. You can figure out whether this is something they're going to be consistent with for the rest of their life or whatever. That's what the medical process is for. But there is no medical uncertainty. So when you state, well, I feel uncertain, it's because you're not educated on the topic. So I'm going to have to leave this here. Aleph, if you have any further questions, feel free to call us in the future. We've given you a lot of time today, hopefully a lot to think about. If you want to research and talk more next time, that would be fine. Ben, do you want to get in a last word?
No, I think I've said my piece. Yeah, address your own knowledge gaps. And that's pretty much it.
All right. Thanks for calling, Aleph. We'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye. Okay. Boy. Well, let me cool down for a second.
You're getting fiery. I know. It's good to be back. It's good to be back, though. I've missed it.
Yeah, it's definitely good to have you for sure. So I want to say before we take our next caller, we have a couple of announcements to make. First of all, it's free to support the show by liking the stream. So if you hit like on this video, it will immediately boost it to more people. It helps the show, and it's quick, it's easy, it's free. Make sure you have the bell turned on to catch all of our other shows, because this is not the only show on the line, even though it is, I mean, objectively the best show on the line. But if you want to tune in next week and make sure you have your bell notifications turned on, we've got 2 shows on Sunday. Let me make sure I've got my calendar figured out here. Okay, yeah. So Sunday, we've got obviously the Sunday show with Matt. We've got the Sunday evening show with Eve and Owen. Or I think Matt also has a guest, Durante Lamar. So tune in for that guest on Sunday. Monday, we've got Skeptalk Forest and Erica will be on that. We've got Chewed Gum Tuesday with Alyssa and Eve. Hang Up on Wednesday, of course, with Matt and Eric. And then next week, I will not be here on TACIS. You will have Arden and Josie, and that is for next week. Additionally, don't forget to get in your super chats, y'all. We read the $5 plus super chats, and you can use that opportunity to vote on which host you want to win or lose the game that we play at the end of the stream, which we will also talk more about in a little bit. But make sure your hashtag Team Lux, hashtag Team Ben, or hashtag Dr. Ben, or whatever you want to do. Make sure you get that hashtag in there, or we will not count it. But we will have a fun, silly game that we play. Actually, Ben, you have not really been around that much since we started playing the game. I'm excited to do that with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. Whoever
No,
loses has
I'm
to
actually
defend a silly position.
confused. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. No,
Yeah.
I've been here, but I think only with you like once or twice.
Mm-hmm. But it's been fun, and it incentivizes you guys to, put your chips on the table. Who did you like best throughout the show? So with all that said, are we feeling calm and collected and ready for another caller?
Yeah. I mean, calm and collected. We'll see. Maybe we'll be spicy. Hopefully it won't be too spicy right away. But yeah, I'm ready. Let's do it.
Okay. I think this one will be a little bit of a palate cleanser. So Chase
Okay,
/ Sapphic Hazard, she, her pronouns from Nevada, wants to know about finding inner peace in the current times. Wants to ask us how we're doing with that process. So hi, Chase. How's it going?
Hi. Hello. Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely.
Yep.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I'm a 41-year-old trans woman. So shit's terrifying right now. As you guys touched on in the opener, it's just really, really scary right now. We're watching what I can only describe as every single bit of legal progress we've made in my lifetime being rolled back in a matter of weeks. And it's a lot. So finding peace in that is really hard. And I was just curious how, if at all, are you managing to do that?
Disconnect from the internet.
Yeah.
Limit. Yeah, I think Lux and I were talking about like either disconnecting when you can or limiting your exposure, because it is an onslaught of things, and that's intentional. Like we know from Project 2025 how they said like their strategy is just to barrage the system and see what doesn't get taken down. Like, so they're trying to machine gun this whole thing, and that's their intent, and they want to wear us down with it. They want us to stop fighting it. They want us to let things kind of slip through. That being said, like, especially if there are issues that, you don't have much control over, or is not immediately impacting you, it is okay to disconnect, take a break, not intake all of that information, because like we need to be around for the long haul. We need to fight when we can, and it's not worth it to torture yourself that much all the time. It's as far as like personally, otherwise, like it's really hard for sure to find like glimmers of hope and everything. So I mean, my biggest strategy has been to not be as involved with all that stuff. It's why one of the reasons why I've been on the show less more recently. But like, hold on to the people around you, hold on to things that you want to be around for. And I mean, a little slice of not necessarily positivity, but like, yeah, there's a lot of stuff coming down for like trans people, for women's rights, for a lot of minority rights, but there's also just in general, the whole system is being targeted. So while it seems that everything is coming down for trans people, and yes, there's an emphasis, there's still like everybody is in some way being hit by something. So it's not all in our direction.
Yeah, they've got
I
a lot to
know.
do.
I definitely know it's not just us.
Yeah. And so the thing that I've been telling people, and Chase, you've probably heard it because I've said it on this show before, but like we are facing a protracted legal back and forth. Like that's what's going to be happening. And obviously it remains to be seen if the administration is going to honor these injunctions and stuff like that. But, somebody passes a law, somebody else doesn't like it, they sue, and then there's a back and forth in the courts and it has to get appealed up and up and up. And like, yes, our Supreme Court sucks ass. And so it's not like that is a hopeful process if anything makes it to the Supreme Court. But we're going to be facing such a long legal battle that it might be the next administration before these things even get resolved at the highest level. So, and obviously we have midterms coming up, and that's going to hopefully kneecap their ability to pass things. Because I'm hoping to see a little bit of a blue wave, assuming that the Democrats don't completely fuck over themselves as they have been repeatedly want to do lately. But like, yeah, I think that it's important, first of all, yes, to log off more often. I find it very difficult. I'm ADHD and I'm prone to addictive behaviors, and this dopamine process of being online is like, it kills me. And I have a health condition that I think is actually dramatically worsened by stress. So I'm like medically, I have to stop paying attention to these things because I have POTS and I would like to be able to do other things in my life. And it's hard to do that when you're symptomatic all the time. So yeah, limiting like how many days a week you're exposing yourself to this stuff, making friends offline, having stuff that you want to do offline. Like if you're turning off, let's say you just give yourself one day a week that's a zero social media day. You catch yourself opening Facebook on your phone and you immediately close it. Like, okay. Or maybe you glance at it for 2 seconds and then you put it away. There will be lots of time for you to do other stuff. Like you can read a book, watch a TV show. Honestly, I'm going to just throw this out there. Genuinely, people out there who are feeling hopeless and who are feeling like kind of a lack of direction, watch Star Wars Andor, because that show is it's got some really big political messages of like how we fight against these things. And I have found it personally quite inspiring. They even talk directly about they're throwing so many things at once, and the speed of repression is almost impossible to keep up with. So some escapism is warranted, I think, but also like doing things actively in your local community, making you feel, first of all, like you're personally effective. Because I think that part of the problem that we're having here is a lot of kind of learned helplessness, that we don't feel like we can do anything because what we have been doing has not been working, i.e., voting is not sufficient on its own. So what you need to do is show up at town halls, contact your representatives, get involved in the community in other ways, like making proposals to expand services for homeless people. That kind of thing is not going to bring the system down, but a million tiny actions like that will build up over time. And then you end up becoming like a valuable member of your community if you're out there meeting people and volunteering and donating what money you have to these causes and everything. Then your neighbors feel an incentive to protect you. And so I just think that like you're doing multiple things at once if you're getting out and like trying to make a change, trying to make more, better community, even if it's just the ladies at the knitting club or something. That's how I've been finding peace. Like for the first time ever, I'm feeling a little bit creative. Like first time ever, I mean in a few years. I like just busted out some watercolor pencils last night because I've had them forever and I didn't know how they worked. And I like just kind of didn't have any artistic purpose, but was just playing with the medium, anything you can do to kind of center yourself on your body and not on like abstract things that you can't directly interact with or control, seems to me to be the best and possibly the most evidence-based practice. Just like being with your body, being in physical space and dealing with things that you actually can control.
Thank you. Can you still hear me?
Oh, I can't. Yeah, I can't hear Lux. I think you're muted.
Am I muted? Oh, well, dang, sorry.
Oh, now you're good. There you go.
Yeah, my microphone thing was being a little bit funny on me. But yeah, so did you have anything you wanted to add to that, Chase, or any questions?
Well, I think you guys gave a really great answer. Thank you.
Cool, yeah.
I appreciate your input.
Yes, and I hope that you feel better. I hope everybody out there takes the advice of, just log off for a day or two. It's okay to take a break. I know we feel it's like a false sense of control that we're giving ourselves when we stay informed every single day about every single beat, right? It's a false sense of security, a false sense of control that ultimately just makes you feel worse. So, I grant you all permission to take Friday off. Have a 3-day weekend,
Yeah.
All right, Chase, thank you so much for your call. And let us know if you have anything else you want to call back next time. We will be here and ready to provide whatever resources we can. So thank you very much and have a good rest of your day.
Have a good one.
Bye. All right. I feel like there is something I'm supposed to do. Nope, it's after the third caller. Well, it's gone pretty long. Let's go ahead and talk about the poll. Since our first caller, we took quite a long time with it. Question this week. I know some of y'all are like, why the hell are you asking this question? That's a very weird question. Trust, there's a reason. Did you know that Nazi Germany purged their Jewish military personnel in the lead up to the Holocaust? So obviously the reason we're asking is because Trump has decided to do a trans military ban. And that is very much fitting into a pattern of then increased persecution. And since Ben is in the military, I figured I'd give him an opportunity to talk about this issue.
Yeah. It's garbage. It's absolute garbage. So the language in the executive order and in the SecDef policy is blatantly discriminatory because just bottom line up front, it does not address medical readiness like at all. It's all about the label of being trans and whether or not like you have a diagnosis of gender dysphoria or if you've ever attempted to change your legal sex. So it's like it's not about whether or not you're on hormones or not. Like sure, that's a factor that will disqualify you. Like any effort to be openly trans will disqualify you. But the fact is I was kind of expecting them to take more of that medical approach as expecting them to do a little bit more of their homework, because you could make the argument that like, hey, if you require injectable therapy, that's a risk for deployment. And that's something that across the board, injectable therapy for anything is pretty much undeployable, like non-deployable. So for trans people in the military, it's standard that in order to be deployable, you have to be stable on non-injectable management. So like, but that's, which is reasonable in a lot of cases. Like if you're stable on androgel, if you're stable on like oral estrogen or like transdermal, etc., then like you're good to go. However, they didn't take that route. They just took if you made any effort to change your sex, whether or not, even if you didn't medically transition, if it's just the attempt, can prevent you from getting a waiver to stay in. And they made this so much about the idea that it's dishonest to be trans and that it does not align with the integrity standards of the military and stuff. So it's taking a blatantly discriminatory approach, which is kind of funny in a way, because like on the one hand, I'm anxious, awaiting to find out if there's an injunction or not. But it's also very funny to see the route that they've taken, because they've shot themselves in the foot with it. Like they took the absolute worst possible take on it, and they made it sound as discriminatory as possible, which I think gives a better shot for it to be, knocked down. But in the meantime, there have been people whose commands are not as supportive, and who have tried to preemptively start separations or try to coerce people to voluntarily separate. Because that's the other thing too. Normally in the military, if you have a service obligation, like if they paid for school or whatever, and you said you're going to do whatever X amount of time, then normally, if you voluntarily separate, if you just say, no, I'm done, I don't want to complete my obligation, oftentimes you'll have to pay back that money that they spent on whatever school. And
Mhm.
but if you involuntarily separate for a non-disciplinary thing, so like it's different. Like if you get a DUI and you get chaptered, that's your own damn fault. Pay back your money. But
Mhm.
if you med board, like if you end up getting in a car crash, like in a military vehicle, and you have back pain that is not curable, and you get med boarded, you don't owe anything back because it's not your fault. You tried to complete your obligation and were told you are not physically fit to do so. That's the opposite of that is what they're trying to do to trans people. They're trying to say you won't pay back anything if you voluntarily separate. If you speak up now, then you won't have any complications, and will like give you double separation pay for people who meet that criteria of being in longer than 6 years. But you'll have to pay it back if you involuntarily separate. So even if you try to complete your obligation and they tell you no, you cannot complete it, then you're on the hook. So it's definitely coercion that they're trying to go for. They're trying to force people to out themselves. Um, so it is very scary wording, but in that I think it should make it easier to fight against. But with that, the one of there are um, two court cases in progress right now, and the first one had their injunction hearing yesterday. So we don't know the results yet for a little while, but the DOJ got absolutely spanked by this judge, and it was glorious. So I encourage people to, like, if you have the patience to like read it or listen back, it's like she does an excellent job, and I believe she's part of the LGBTQ community as well, and she is very well versed on the issues,
Oh,
and
yeah,
she's
no, I
been
did check.
holding.
They're trying to say
Yeah,
that her ruling is invalid because she's a lesbian.
yeah,
Therefore she's biased. Yeah, yeah, I know. No, scathing. She was
yeah.
great. Yeah, Judge
She is
Reyes, I wanna say.
fantastic. Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And she's been holding their feet to the fire. She's been making them define things, define what the waiver actually means, who is going to sign the waivers, what exact criteria are for gender dysphoria, other than just general depression. Because like she had this great statement of like, if we just kick people out for having like depression, then you get rid of your entire military. Like that's ridiculous. So they have to clearly define some things that they haven't defined, and it's clear that they don't know what they're asking for. Like they want trans people to be gone, but they don't know how to define it. They don't know what the current policy is. They don't know safety risk. They don't know anything about medication costs. And so they just got destroyed. So that's some like some positive news. I'm hopeful about the outcome of this particular uh, court proceeding, but I acknowledge that this might be a temporary win, but a win nonetheless. So that's a lot of words to catch you all up to what's going on. Um, but that is currently what the military is looking at.
Yes. And, yeah, it's basically an ongoing process. We'll see what happens. It just, I think, was worthy to note it in this context. Like, first of all, yes, everybody in the chat here, somebody who's directly impacted by this ban, like by this thing, and like the worry that this has people dealing with, and like the idea that these people might have to find a different job or that they would owe money back to the military. Like, and the military is like, I think the number one, like the singular number one employer of trans people in the country. Like lots of trans
Yeah,
people have sought
it's like
a stable employment that way.
yeah, it's like roughly 6% of the general population um, serves in the military, like is serving in the military, and 20% of trans people. So astronomically like high numbers compared to the general population of trans
Mhm.
people who have volunteered to serve. So
Yeah.
like people are willing to do it. Just let them keep doing it.
Yeah, like let these people protect and serve our country and be highly skilled, just like Ben is like a highly skilled medical personnel. You don't want to kick out these people who've been in the military for a long time because that destabilizes the entire structure. So lots of reasons to be against this, lots of things to be aware of as we continue to watch the ramp up of attacks on trans rights that, Trump has posted he posted like a pink triangle with the circle and the X through it to indicate that he is planning on continuing his attacks on, I mean, queer and trans people both. Like the pink triangle was for gay men, it was for transsexuals or whatever the term that they would have used in Germany at the time. And remember that those groups did not get restitution after the Holocaust. The trans people were not even recognized until quite recently, and the gay men were rearrested and put in prison because being gay was still illegal under the law after Nazi Germany stopped being like Nazi Germany. So, yep, that's our poll for today. Tell us what your thoughts are on the community tab. About 59% of you here in chat did know about this and 40% didn't, which is honestly more than I was expecting. So I guess congratulations that your high school education wasn't garbage. Anyway, with all that said, don't forget to hit the like button, everybody. Don't forget to get your $5 or more super chats in with your hashtag Team Lux or hashtag Team Ben so that you can get your votes in. With that, I am ready to move on to another caller. Sound good?
Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome. Yeah, let's just go ahead and take them in order, I guess. Will, him from Idaho wants to talk about what if you're wrong about the trans topic, says that he is an ally, but wants the opinion on the other side. Will, you're live on the line. How's it going?
Hello, I'm doing fine. What about you two?
Doing pretty good. What do you want to talk
All right.
about today?
Yeah, I have a question pretty much explained. I'm looking at the hypotheticals. Like, what does this mean if, say, all science just turned out to be wrong one day or something? What does that mean about your advocacy or that sort of stuff?
So I just want to phrase the question in a way that I make sure I understand. You're wondering, since we take the position of following the science, if it turned out that the science that we currently understand about trans people was diametrically incorrect, like that is actually a bad thing to affirm trans people, what would the implications be for our position and advocacy?
Kind of like I'm more looking at like gender a is a choice instead of being like you choose to be whatever you want instead.
That does
I feel like I'm
nothing.
doing a
That
bad
does
job
nothing
explaining.
for my position. It still does nothing for my position. If we are totally wrong, and being trans is a choice, or like your gender identity is a choice, it does not change anything because my position is still based on respecting other people, and the evidence still stands that trans people, like affirming people, leads to better mental health outcomes, better physical health outcomes, better community outcomes. So as far as utility and just basic human decency, it does absolutely nothing to the argument. I would continue affirming people.
Yeah, basically, like we don't
question.
presently have any. I just want to elaborate on that. Like, we don't have any. This is what LF was asking about. Like, is there some way to find the thing in the brain that makes you identify as trans? There seems to be some evidence that certain things in the brain can correlate with a transgender identity, but our advocacy already takes the position that it's not something you need to biologically prove, basically. Like Josie was saying last week or she has said multiple times that she doesn't want to find the thing in the brain that makes you trans. She prefers to treat it like a social issue where, like Ben was saying, we just take people at their word. We try to help, have the best outcome for that individual person. And like, I think if it is a choice, like, okay, cool. Like, wouldn't it be great if we lived in a world where being trans was so destigmatized that people could choose to be it instead of it being what feels like a biological imperative where we would rather die? Like, wouldn't it be a great world where trans people don't transition because they would rather die than not live themselves? Like, wouldn't it be better if we had a world where people were like, I think being a woman would be fucking rad, and then they just did it? And then there was like no problem with it societally. I don't know. What do you think, Will?
I'm thinking this is probably the answer I should have expected, like similar to abortion, you're all just about the position's all about having the choice to do it. As long as it helps you feel better or do better, you're all for it. Or it sounds like you're all for it.
Yeah, the whole thing is like we believe in personal autonomy, and that should hypothetically be like one of the core tenets of American society. It's one of those things where we espouse a belief, but we don't actually use that belief in practice. Like we say you should be able to make all your own health decisions and everything, but also we're going to restrict abortion, but also we're going to restrict gender affirming care. It's that whole thing where the Republicans say we're for small government, but then they try to police what you do in your own house. The hypocrisy of that. So I mean, our position is, I guess fundamentally it's my freedom. I think I should have the freedom to do whatever I want with my own body. As long as it's not harming anybody else, like why do we have helmet laws? Like why do we have, seatbelt laws? Like, well, that case, like if your body launches out of the car, that could potentially be bad for other people, right? But we do sort of limit people's, or we address people's personal freedoms in a balanced way that is like, okay, as long as this isn't harming anybody else. So I don't see really a good justification for going any other way. Like either you own your body or your body is owned by the state, and I know which one I would prefer.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have any further thoughts, Will?
No, I expected the conversation might be a little bit more complex, but that is the perfect answer. I only could wonder what someone on the other side of this opinion debate would say.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like those people, I have a hard time understanding those people, because what is the problem actually? And they basically just invent harm. And that's why, like, I take the scientific position of, okay, why don't you demonstrate the harm to me? If you can't demonstrate a harm, then there's no reason to restrict this. Like, that's kind of the thing, is like the opposition, like they just make shit up. I mean, it's kind of seems to be the consistent thing that they do.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if you're satisfied, Will.
Yeah.
Did you want to get a last word in? Please. We like to give people the last word, except Aleph, because fuck them.
I was just going to say, seems like this conversation was a lot shorter than I expected.
Yeah, that's cool. So, hey, listen, sometimes that's a good call. Sometimes I appreciate those ones that's like, cool, we answered your question. Great. Moving on.
Oh, yep.
All right. Well, thanks for calling in, Will. We appreciate it. If you have any further questions, I will not be here next week, but Josie and Arden will. So feel free to call back again if you have any more questions.
Mm-hmm. Bye.
Bye. All right. Yeah. No, seriously, the short and sweet ones, chef's kiss. Love those. So I want to say we've just started a poll in the chat. If you guys don't know how this works, we have a game we play where $5 or more super chats, you can vote for hashtag Team Lux or hashtag Team Ben. Whoever gets the fewest votes loses, and they have to do a punishment. The punishment is taking 2 minutes to defend a silly position, and you can vote on what that position is. Today, you can choose between birds are secretly transgender, all Congress members need dragon sonas, or drag sonas. I can't read, it turns out. They need
drag sonas. Yes,
sonas.
drag.
Thank you, Arden.
Queens.
Turns out I am also dyslexic. Or we should have state-funded swords distributed to all trans people.
Oh, yes.
So, yes. I know. There's some good ones today. So get your votes in with your super chats, and get your votes in on that poll, and we will have fun at the end of the show. I think I'm gonna vote for drag sonas. So that's what I'm gonna go with.
Oh.
All right. So that said, I am ready to move on to our next caller. We have Rob, him from California. His wife is conservative, and he wants to talk about the science of transness. So Rob, you are live on the line. How's it going?
Hello, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for taking my call. I really appreciate it. This is a very informative show as I'm listening here. And some of the information that's come up already has already helped me a little bit. But as you stated, yes, I'm having kind of a rolling debate with my wife, who's a very smart person, but she's kind of a black and white thinker, I'll say, when it comes to trans and situations that revolve around that. And of course, there's so much going on in the country right now that I feel differently. And I'm trying to do this in a way, the discussion with her, in a way that will make sense to her and help her, I think, see things a little bit differently. But I also want to be correct. And I basically was in a situation where she was pointing out that, in her view anyway, sex is controlled solely by chromosomes, and you have these chromosomes or those chromosomes, and that makes you male or female, and that it's black and white essentially. And I pointed out that nothing in biology is black and white, and that everything's on a spectrum. Nobody's, it's not that everybody's either tall or they're short or they're skinny or they're fat. There's always an in-between, and that gender, sex, and things are controlled by a lot of different factors and not just chromosomes. And so she said, no, the science is behind me, and I'm going to send you the link that has all this information. Okay, great. So my take was, this is wonderful. I'm going to at least see what her scientific take is on all this, even though I knew that this isn't probably very accurate, whatever she's looking at. And what she sent me was basically a link to a website from somebody who used to be a biology teacher in high school, I guess. And it was mostly just his political take on, being against trans rights and things like that. So it was not scientific at all, in my opinion. And I said, well, I'm going to do some research, and I'm actually going to look at scientific studies. And as you pointed out here today already, there's a lot of studies out there, and they're not hard to find. But I wanted to piece things together to build a case for at what point do the differences start to happen between males and females. How does this get impacted not only by chromosomes, but also by other factors such as hormones, et cetera, et cetera. So I've done my research, and I want to talk to her some more about this, but I wanted to make sure that I was saying things and consolidating them in a way that kind of made sense. And I don't want to go back and say something wrong and then have it come back, of course, that, it's going to look bad for me and cause the whole thing to blow up again. So is it okay if I just run something past you and see if this makes sense in kind of a quick, simple analogy?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, great. So based on what I've learned, it seems to me that the chromosomes essentially establish the template. You have the XX, you're going to be female, you have the XY, you're going to be male in terms of the template that's established. And that is important to get things rolling in the first stages of some human embryonic development. But then after a few weeks, especially for those with XY, then there needs to be a cascade of hormones triggered by the chromosomes. And that it's that cascade that causes a lot of the sexual characteristics that we know of just from interacting with human beings. The actual interactions we have are actually caused by that secondary cascade of chromosomes, and it impacts not only people's physical appearance and other factors within their body that are physical, but also mental states as well. So far, does that sound correct to you?
Yeah, it's correct.
It sounds exactly like a Forrest Hawkeye video. Yeah.
Yeah. There's like some little nuances within there that aren't super important for this level of conversation. So if she comes back with certain questions or finds something that gives a bit more depth about specific genes or whatever, like, you're not incorrect. It's just like, that's just a layer on top of all that. So
yeah, my hope is to not try to. Yeah, I don't want to get down into the weeds, because I feel like I've collected enough scientific articles that I'll just say, great, here are these articles, read them, and let's talk some more. But I guess the thing that seems interesting to me, this whole thing kind of made a light go off in my head about why people are thinking so differently on this, and maybe you get this all the time on the show, but it seems that the chromosomes really are almost like telling somebody to go build you a house, and this person who's a contractor goes and builds a house, and then you come and you're going to go move into the house that day, and you look at the house, and it's just a framework. It's a wooden frame. It doesn't have the plumbing. It doesn't have the wiring. It doesn't have the external walls. And the contractor says, I'm done. What do you mean you're done? You haven't finished the house. And that seems to me kind of like what the chromosomes are doing. and then it takes that cascade of hormones to actually finish the house, and the house can be different. Even if the framework initially is the same for many people, it could be different by the time you actually get it done. Does that analogy sound accurate?
Yeah, I think
I would say that's a decent, yeah.
Yeah, I think my my preferred for that would be like a recipe analogy, where the chromosome or like the genes on the chromosomes are like a recipe, and like you could have a recipe for a brownie and a recipe for a cookie, and they may be completely separate, but you could also like copy paste some of the cookie recipe and the brownie recipe, and then you end up with a brownie cookie thing that's somewhere in between. And it's like the thing that you read off of, but that can change as you go. So yeah, any one of those analogies should work fine.
Okay, great. Yeah, it's just it was amazing to me reading through this, the impact that hormones could have, and people not even thinking that way in terms of the current dialogue coming up from the conservative side. And it's just amazing to me. And I just think if people thought this through a little bit, we know how chromosomes certainly interact with people when they're developing, but the hormones and everything else, hormones happen to be different in just about everybody, right? And impact people differently in terms of how their receptors work and how the levels are. So it's not surprising to me at all that there would be a spectrum of people at the end of the process that are going to be different. And so anyway, to me, this just seems so clear. So thank you. I really appreciate you folks helping me to think this through, and hopefully it'll make a difference.
Yeah, I want to say too, before we let you go, that I just want to acknowledge that this is a very difficult situation to be in, and I like my heart goes out to you, because I can't imagine having an ideological difference with my husband like this. Like I just want to acknowledge that like that is a very difficult position to be in, trying to reconcile this. And I also want to say that it is entirely possible, and you should be prepared for the possibility that your wife does not hold the same beliefs as you as far as like the standard of evidence that she's willing to accept. Because if she's willing to like treat an ex high school biology teacher, and I know that you're not, maybe that's not exactly the situation, but an ex biology teacher, maybe even he was a college professor. But if she considers that like the standard of evidence for her beliefs, it's entirely possible that she is doing like post hoc justification, where she's already written her conclusion and she will find anybody to reinforce her position. And then the other thing that people do is that they'll say, well, those medical associations are all biased. It's, you know, you can't trust what the American Medical Association says. So like, I just want to acknowledge that that's quite difficult to a position to be in.
Yeah, and I actually am kind of anticipating that there's a potentiality. This is a journey, and not just a quick one and done discussion that I'm having with her, but I'm purposely trying to find some research that goes back a decade or so, and some recent stuff as well, that builds on it, so that it's not just, oh, well, somebody came up with this 2 years ago because of current political climate or whatever. But yes, that's a challenge. So, but she's a smart person, and I'm looking forward to talking to her more about it. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah. And as a final recommendation, Forrest Valkai, who's one of our hosts here on the line, just posted like an almost 2-hour long video 2 weeks ago. He does have a shorter video from like 5 years ago where he kind of very basically explains the whole cascade of processes that you mentioned, where it's like the SRI has to then switch on this, which has to then switch on this. And that's why there are so many different intersex conditions, because it can happen at any point in that process. So yeah, I would say I would recommend looking at Forrest's channel. It's Forrest with 2 R's, and he's a biologist, and he's very knowledgeable on this issue, and I find him quite affable as well.
And I was the medical reviewer of that video, so.
Yeah, so we have an actual medical reviewer on that as well. We make sure that we're absolutely correct on these things.
His stuff, for his video.
Nice.
Okay, excellent. I'm sure it's great. I'll check it out.
Yeah, and if you have any further questions in the future, feel free to call us back, Rob. We appreciate your call.
All right. Thank you for being available. Take care. Bye.
Doodles. Oh my goodness. I like it. Like quick calls. Like maybe I should have taken one before I took a left, because I feel like we've blown our load of spiciness for today. Yeah. So for now, let's move on to Ian. Uses he, they pronouns from Scotland, would like some advice regarding being agender, non-binary, and gender void. Ian, you're live on the line. How's it going?
Hi, Lux. Hi, Dr. Ben. I'm good, thanks.
Awesome. Well, what did you want to ask us about? Like any specifics you want to get into?
First of all, can I address like a couple of things from Ailif's call?
Oh,
Because I've
sure.
been listening to the whole show.
Very
Yeah.
quickly. Move through it quick.
Yeah, very quickly. As usual, I find it very disingenuous that he kept using the word child instead of minor, so that you imagine somebody very young.
Yeah.
And he also needs to define adult. He's very obsessed on adult. Does he mean adult when you're 16 when you can drive a car? Does he mean 17 when you can join the military? Does he mean 21 when you can drink? And that's just an American culture.
Yeah.
So he needs to
These
define
people
the
seem
word.
really hesitant to define their actual. Yeah, they're like adult human female, and I'm like, okay, what do you mean by all three of those words? Because all three of those words are ambiguous.
They leave it vague so that they can move their goalposts. Yeah. But yeah, what's your question today?
To the call, I've been over the last 5 years or so through therapy and stuff, kind of accepted that I'm asexual and aromantic. But through all of that time, I've kind of been looking into gender more and watching the channel. And I think it was Arden that mentioned that if you're kind of obsessed with the sort of topic of gender, then you might want to look a bit more into that and find out why. And I have been. So yeah, I've never really had a strong sense of gender. I'm comfortable presenting as male, but some things that come with being male and masculinity kind of make me uncomfortable. Like really masculine type things, like wearing a suit, going to the football, being sports obsessed, all that kind of stuff. I don't really identify with. And I guess I've had some society taught biases. I think I'm not non-binary. I don't identify as that. Like, but then if I'm agender, then yeah, I am non-binary because that's a third option. So I'm just kind of
totally
looking into that, and I guess struggling a little bit to kind of pin down how I feel.
Yeah, I mean, it's a process, like going through, like figuring out your sexual orientation and being in that position of like you're asexual and aromantic, which is like that's difficult to process and figure out and accept about yourself. And by going through that process, it totally makes sense to me that if you're like, well, I'll be introspective about my sexuality, but like also how do I feel about gender? And it is a little tricky. Like I also identify as agender. I came to that through a long journey where initially I like thought that I was a trans man, and then I identified as genderqueer for a long time because that was kind of the common word that you would hear more than you would hear non-binary for a while. And to me, genderqueer meant like I can do whatever I want. I can dress however I want. Like it's a label that rejects definition, kind of. Um, but then I've come to realize like, okay, saying I'm genderqueer kind of assumes that I have a sense of gender, and I don't think I have one. I think that this is just a system that exists around me. And gradually I've come to this place where I don't care how I appear to other people. Like I'm not trying to outwardly exhibit any particular gender identity. I just want to be comfortable. Um, and I did transition, like medically. I know, and this is I think where it comes very tricky for somebody who's like, I am comfortable with my how I'm presenting based on like how I was born, and I don't want to medically transition. Therefore, am I valid as trans, or what does that mean about me? And obviously have a lot of sympathy for that, even though I did transition. Like I'm not presently seeking any additional care or anything. So I'm kind of also relapsing into this place where like I'm basically presenting as my birth sex because it's just convenient, and I just don't really care how people view me. So it's obviously like a really, I think it's an ongoing internal process of like I think that we tend to try so hard to pin down a particular label, and that's also what I appreciate about saying I'm agender, is it's kind of saying like, whatever, I'm not really trying to pin down exactly how I feel today. I'm not really trying to express a certain
Yeah.
gender or anything. I just don't fucking care. And I think that that's a perfectly acceptable place to be. And I personally say, yes, even if you don't physically transition, I would say that is a trans identity and certainly a non-binary identity. Uh, and then like what you want to do with yourself follows from that. And I personally found that it feels better to do things that are
Yeah.
typically associated
The
with
only thing I kind
masculinity
of
and
feel
femininity.
strongly on at the moment is kind of pointing over there going, I'm not that.
Yeah.
I'm not kind of it.
Yeah, and I think that that's what we have in common with binary trans people too, is like we are fundamentally like rejecting this original label that we all had. And that's what kind of we all share that. And just because we don't have a clear endpoint that we're going from this opposite concept to this other opposite concept, that doesn't make it like less of a weird experience to be like, yo, I don't vibe with any of this.
Yeah. So I have found myself kind of going into the woods a little bit, looking into like xenogender stuff and that. And before I couldn't really understand it, but now like a light's gone on, it makes sense. Like people are just are searching for a concept that they vibe with that makes them feel comfortable.
Exactly. Yeah. And I personally see a lot of people who identify as agender or gender void tend to have like a like goth uh presentation, and that to me feels like its own kind of wonderful and unique expression, and I'm like I'm more comfortable being associated with that than I am the standard idea of what non-binary is. Like so like agender and xenogenders, like they tend to just be way cooler in some ways, like in a sense that they're transgressive in a number of other ways. They're in other subcultures that I find interesting. Um,
Yeah, they've got a certain
yeah,
level of like, I don't care. I'm weird, screw
yeah,
you.
yeah. Isn't that so liberating? I love that.
Yeah, yeah. It's felt really good looking into all this stuff, even though you like kind of feel adrift quite a bit.
Yeah,
But yeah, it's I don't know. It's an odd feeling.
it is. Yeah, and like I think that so often too, it's kind of hard to pinpoint what is dysphoria for a non-binary person, and it's confusing when you're like, "Oh, I don't like being called sir or ma'am," and like I don't like being treated this way or that way. Like I did try for a bit to like socially integrate as a male because I was trying to be an electrician, and it was just easier for me to be like, "I'm a gay man," instead of like, "I'm trans." Uh, and that was also like uncomfortable, even, and like my health is the reason why I can't continue in that job, but just like even being treated as a man and accepted that way like felt really terrible
Yeah.
to me. So
I
yeah,
mean,
you just
I
kind of
do
have to
recognize
find
that
your
I
own
have a
happiness.
yeah. I recognize that I kind of have a certain level of privilege, like being a white, like male presenting person in the Western world who doesn't feel greatly dysphoric. Well, it kind of comes on
Yeah,
the
but those
level of
those
everybody
social
has
things
their
are
own
still
thing.
dysphoria, you know?
Yeah, yeah, true.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. What were you gonna go ahead and finish your thought?
No, no, yeah. I was just going to say, like, yeah, very similar to some conversations I've had with my therapist, where it goes on is like, you don't have to have like a top trumps of who's got the worst trauma.
Yeah, yeah. You can have trauma even if it's not like quote unquote as bad as somebody else's. You can have dysphoria even if it's not quote unquote as bad as somebody else's. And, that shouldn't be like a determinant for like who gets to identify as what or who gets access to what care or whatever. So, yeah.
Yeah,
I know it's
yeah,
like it's fun though, right? Like it's fun to be able to explore these things and to recognize that. Like I just want to I always encourage people to try to find the fun in it, to find the play in experimenting with gender expression, or I don't know, just like whatever it is
Yeah,
that
well,
you want to
that's kind
do.
of the angle that I'm coming at it from. Is like it's not something that I feel if I don't do it, it's like life threatening. It's more getting to do it is affirming. So I guess a little bit of euphoria rather than dysphoria.
Yes. Finding the joy in life and in gender. I think, everybody bogs it down so much and says, like, everything sucks. Being trans is terrible. And like, there are a lot of bad things externally about being trans right now. Um, in England, they're doing all that crazy nonsense about the NHS and everything. But
Yeah, that has a
we
little bit of
gotta
fallout in
find.
Scotland as well. You tend to follow along,
Yeah, I'm
unfortunately.
always so confused on whether the things happening in England affect Scotland. I'm like, I have watched so many videos explaining what Britain and the United Kingdom are, and I still don't know.
Yeah, it's a little bit messy, but to make it a bit simpler, Westminster is essentially federal government, and each area has their own parliament, which is kind of like a state,
Sure.
but not federated.
Hmm. Okay,
So
that
yeah,
makes sense. Yeah, there's like an overarching thing that y'all share, but then each individual country has its own. Like Ireland had its own separate referendum for like gay marriage back in the day.
yeah. Well,
Yeah,
Ireland's separate now because they're still in the EU, but yeah, it's all complicated.
it is. It is. It's fun. Well, did you have anything else you
Yeah,
wanted
but
to
I was
add
just
about
wondering if
like
there's
the?
any.
Sure, go ahead.
Yep, sorry, there goes the delay. I was just going to say, is there any resources or anything that you maybe recommend? I've already been signed up to the Avon forums and that, and finding a few people to chat with there.
Yeah, I mean, finding people to talk to is like, you can sometimes find like Discord servers that are associated with various creators. Like, I have a Discord server where there's like a bunch of trans people in there. Not saying you have to go there specifically, but that's a good way to make friends, like a good way to find people who have commonalities with you. And I'm big on trying to find people in person when possible, obviously within like COVID safe precautionary guidelines and everything. But meeting people in person, I find, is just like it really sinks into your brain, the camaraderie and the community a little bit better than when you're online.
Yeah,
So,
there is
I don't know
a
where you live exactly, but finding someplace locally through a college or something.
yeah, the Avon group's like an international thing, but they do have organised meetup groups, and there's one in Scotland, so I've been looking at that.
Yes, go do it. Absolutely. That would be so cool.
And one of their meetups is a board game cafe, which is perfect because they let dogs in too.
Ooh, yes, yeah, and finding community in other ways as well. Like you'll meet a trans person when you're doing something else. If you just go out in the world, you'll meet more of them. So it doesn't even, yeah, like if you're meeting and you're going to play a board game together, perfect. You have more in common than just being trans, and I think that that is where we build the best connections.
Yeah, it's funny how many sort of generally non-conforming people in general pop up in TTRPG spaces.
Yeah, isn't it? Every D&D table has at least one. Like you can't get 6 people together with a TTRPG without somebody being queer at the table. It's a lot of fun. I love
Yeah,
it.
it's like this reality sucks. I'm going to make my own.
Yes, for sure, for sure. Well, Ian, do you have any last questions or comments you want to make before we skedaddle on to our last caller for today?
I know. That's great. Thanks a lot for letting me ramble
Cool.
on.
Yeah, and if you
I just looked. I know Dr. Ben probably won't want to comment about his work, but I just hope everything's going well for him.
Yeah, it's all good. I know I haven't talked much, but I'm a binary trans person, so my opinion doesn't weigh much into this conversation. But I'm glad you two were able to have a good chat. We need more of this conversation too. Like, there's a whole subset of the population that like this show is so often focused on binary trans people, and it's nice to have these talks where we get to validate all members of our community. So
Yeah, that's cool.
For sure.
I'll just say that I always enjoy when you're on, when you give the medical smackdown. So
glad
It is.
glad.
It's great. Yeah. I'm like, Ben, you can take this medical call. I'll just sit back here and chat, or just look at the chat and read it as we go along. But yeah, thank you, Ian. I
Yeah.
appreciate your call. If you have anything in the future you want to chat with us about, of course, feel free to call back. And I wish you luck in making some trans friends near you. I'm sure it's a very exciting time of life to get to meet some people.
yeah, thanks a lot. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye.
You as well.
Okay. So before we take our last caller, we're going to get into super chats soon. Okay, everybody. So we will read the $5 or more super chats, and you can take that opportunity to include hashtag Team Lux or hashtag Team Ben in your super chat. That counts as a vote. And the person who loses has to defend a silly position. I'll figure out what the silly position is later. We vote on it in the chat there. There's a poll. You'll figure it out. And it's not too late in the stream to hit the like button. That's always immediately helpful. It's free and it's a quick, easy way to support the show. With all that said, I think I'm ready to go ahead and take our last caller.
Let's do it.
This person give their name as Alive Nihilist using he, him pronouns in India. Wants to ask about terminology like non-binary and pansexual. So, is that working? I clicked the button. Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, Alive Nihilist. You should
Hello.
be live on the line. How's it going?
Yeah, it's going fine. Can I know your names first, because I may be bad at pronunciation, please?
Sure. I'm Luxander, or just Lux, and Dr. Ben is my co-host.
Yeah. I'm from India, and India is very far back in this matter of whole LGBTQ thing. We have the non decriminalization of gay relations recently. Recently means maybe it's 7-8 years ago. Recently,
Mhm.
and the Supreme Court has repealed our marriage rights recently. So a lot of things are going on now. Nobody is talking about it. The thing I want to discuss on here. See, the problem I mostly face here to explain people what's bisexual, and it's a very simple term, but on simply that perspective, when we go in deep, like pansexual and non-binary, it's even harder to explain those people. And I get it as criticism a lot, that people tell me that you people are so into this labels and names that if even I want to if even I want to accept you people, it's a bit hard that you never draw a line, you never tell how many genders there are. These are some criticisms I hear near my circles. What are your views on this type of thing? And is it even legit, or they just need one more reason to get rid of trans rights and etc.? Yeah.
Yeah, did you want to jump in on it, Ben?
Just a real quick question. Are you in North or South India, may I ask?
North India.
North India. Okay.
Not exactly. I'm not good at geography. I'm from a state called Odisha. Check out
Odisha.
on map.
Okay.
It's not actually not even north south. Yeah.
Yeah, I know where that is.
Yeah.
I spent a summer in India, so I'm trying to see if like my experiences there would be anywhere similar to yours, just knowing how culturally different every state is. Can you kind of repeat your question again so I know how to answer it properly?
I want to say that I get a hard time explaining people about my thing, that I am a bisexual. They don't even know what is a bisexual person. And then comes even complex topic not in sense of I'm discriminating that these are easy and these are the true ones and that are the complicated. No, not discriminating way, but how the cisgender population consider it. I'm talking with their perspective that they don't even know these simple terms. In many family, they if there is a girl who also loves a girl, they also call them gay as ladki wali gay. Ladki means female wali gay.
Yeah.
And that's the situation here. So, and the thing is that I get a lot of criticism that you people, means our community, have so many names, so many terminologies, and it's a vast thing that it is so complicated for us. Even if we want to support you, we can't because we can't debate every single stance of yours. These kind of things I get from them. So is it just a hoax, or is it you think it can be a legit argument or something? What do you think?
Yeah. I think there are ways to get around that, like, language situation. Sure, English has made certain terms like more commonplace in our language. But like that being said, you may not have the exact like right label to use that people will understand, but you could stick to describing like the concept. Like I think people would still be able to understand, oh, this person is sexually attracted to like both men and women. Like I think that's fairly easy for people to understand, even if it's like culturally foreign to them. Whether or not they accept that as a legitimate identity is another question, but you might just need to start from square one with a lot of these people and just assume that, you know, they haven't heard these terms, or they don't, are unfamiliar with these identities, but just kind of describing them in concept and making it clear that, you know, they're humans just like anybody else, and you can have different different things that you're interested in. So just maybe take it super simply with them.
Yeah, that would
I
be my
believe
suggestion too.
Allah.
Go ahead.
Please. No, you
Sorry,
continue.
there's a bit of
Please.
a delay, darling.
Yeah, you can continue. I can say it later.
Sure. Yeah, no, I was just going to add on to what Ben was saying that, you know, I think sometimes it's okay to keep things simple. You know, even when we're talking about trans people, if I'm meeting someone on the level and they're like, how can a man be a woman? And I can be like, well, some people are born women and then they become men. Like, even though that is not like my personal preference of language, like I am willing to adjust my language to meet people where they're at. So if someone doesn't know the term bisexual, just say I like to have sex with both men and women. Or like when we're getting into things that are more in the weeds, like pansexual, I feel like you might as well just say it's basically bisexual. Like the functional difference between these things is very small. These people are still engaging in the same kind of behavior where they're having partners of different genders or different sexes. And when you're talking about non-binary, you can just be like, it just means neither a man or a woman. Like, let's keep it simple. And I also think that it would be worthy to push back on this idea that acceptance or support is predicated on understanding, like that you don't have to understand the way that someone else wants to live their life to be able to say that they should have the ability to live the life that they want to live. So, you know, I would say you can, if you want, try to spend the time defining the terms if you think that that will make the conversation easier to have. But ultimately, I think that it's worth pointing out, like, I know that you don't get it, but that doesn't mean that gay marriage should be illegal. Like, I know that you personally can't imagine being gay, but like that doesn't mean that other people aren't gay and that they should be allowed to get married, you know? So just take the BS out of it, I guess, and just take the fluff out of it and just be direct and use very simple language. Just seems like sometimes that's the best option for people who aren't very knowledgeable on the topic.
There's the thing. I can explain any orientation to them as easy as possible, but when the part comes to sex or gender, that's the toughest part to explain them. They don't know the difference between sex and gender. Keep it aside. They can't accumulate the idea that how can someone be born human consider himself out of this whole gender thing. I till I'm 18 now. I till date I found not a single person who can get this idea in my close circles, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's frustrating. And I want to be clear too that that's something that Americans also struggle with. I don't think you were here since the beginning of the call, but our very first call today was somebody who just dramatically did not understand that gender and sex are different things. So I hope you don't feel like that's a unique struggle that you're dealing with, because that's very common, and it is quite difficult to get people to a place where they understand that they're different. And ultimately, we probably won't change a lot of people's minds on that, unfortunately. What did you want to say, Ben?
Oh yeah, no, just along those lines. Yeah, there are plenty of people that don't understand this, and it's the same concept. Like, you can try to explain it like super simply, like in the way that maybe you'd explain it to a 5-year-old, like just a difference between who you are as a person and what your body is. And it's okay that your body isn't always the way that you envision yourself, and it's like kind of, you can explain it as if they're 5 and they still might not get it, but they might be more easily able to understand. And I don't know if, like, depending on their religious or non-religious backgrounds, if they already have like this sense of mind-body dualism, it might be an interesting like analogy. Not saying that I necessarily like agree with mind-body dualism, but it just may be a way to make an analogy and communicate it better with people who already have some concept of like things that could be different in one person.
And there's a reason why people used to say, I have a
Yeah.
woman's soul trapped in a man's body. It's because it was how do I explain that my inner self is different than my outer self? You can use the language of religion if it is the way to communicate, like, my spirit, my soul, my essence is different to what I am on the outside. Like, you can use all kinds of things to explain this in a way that like is technically not correct, or maybe like you don't fully agree with. But again, it's about the how effective are you at getting people to understand the general concept?
Yeah, genuinely, I get it. This thing is so problematic here that I feel dysphoric a lot, but I don't want to explore that thing because the thing that is, if I get to know a single fact about me, I'm not one of those person who will shut his mouth and not express it. I'm gonna express it, and people will get more what I say irritated of me.
Sure.
They do get very irritated. I can't. The thing is, I can't explore myself because the closest friends I have, they won't able to get me. It's a very tricky position right now.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
is really difficult. And you said you're 18. It may be that in your journey, you end up doing what a lot of trans people do, which is once they transition, they move to a whole new city and they make brand new friends who don't know anything about where they came from or who they used to
Yeah.
be. Yeah, it's tough though when your friends don't support you or understand it.
Yeah, I have a plan to leave India, whole at all, and
Mhm.
I wish to become a psychologist and clinical psychologist. I want to research about how this brain work, and yeah, my plan is that one day I would be sitting at you people's position, maybe hopefully not, but debating these conservatives from India too. Yeah.
That'd be awesome if you did something directed towards people in your own culture and your own background, that'd be awesome. Of course, like we are just one community of people doing like this, greatly directed towards an American audience, and sometimes a UK audience, but like the more people from across the world that can communicate this in your own language and your own like cultural perspective, that's great.
Yeah. And at last, I want to know a very small topic from you right now. That the thing happens in mostly debate. I debate people a lot. They come up with this old thing, and I can't get a best definition. Can you give me the best definition for women that that can be told? Because I have one of my definitions. Uh, you heard of Jovan? I use her use his definition of a woman. But can you give me a better definition of woman that I can use whenever this people jump at you? What define woman like questions?
Yeah. When people ask what is a
Yeah.
woman, they're trying to do what is kind of a gotcha question, like, aha, I gotcha. You can't even answer the question because the answer is complex and the answer is dependent on context. So in the simplest terms, we can say a woman is a person who performs woman. Like when we say a woman is a person who identifies as a woman, what we're describing is the action of placing yourself in that role. So like if you perform the social role of womanhood, like whether you were born female or not, like that is how we currently define womanhood, is like if you seem like a woman, if you occupy that kind of role in society, like that is how we define what a woman is. And like that's, I mean, it's not like most people are not going to accept that definition, unfortunately, because what they want is like point to the thing in the brain or point to the gametes or something. Like they want something more like a simple single answer, when the answer is like it's a person who moves through a complex set of behaviors that we have decided is what a woman is. Unfortunately, I don't know,
Yeah.
Ben, do you have anything better?
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's where I was going to go
Recently, I
to.
used
Yeah.
no, sorry, my bad. You
No,
can continue.
go for it. I don't have much to add to Lex's definition.
Yeah. I recently used this definition. I recently got it. Jovan described as a person whose gender identity aligns with their understanding of a personal gender schema on the woman scale or the female scale, something like that. I am missing a lot. I mean, yeah. I hope you get it.
Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah, I
think
mean,
for the
Hello.
purposes of this conversation, that is basically what we just said. You just used better,
yeah,
more concise words for it. Yeah.
yeah. You used
Yeah,
kind of
because
the technical lingo of sociology, which is great. I love it.
Mhm.
I'm an art student, and I was telling that the thing is, with your definition, they come with this. Maybe this is fallacy or something that we can't define something with the word itself. So that's why I better this way to this one is a better way to define it. So we don't fall into that fallacy. Is it a fallacy? I don't know.
You were breaking up quite a bit in that. So can you just really briefly say
Yeah.
what the fallacy is that you're asking about?
Yeah, some people point out that when our definition is asked, we can't answer it with the same word that you said. No, like a person who performs womanhood or woman. So we
Okay, I
can't
understand.
answer the. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I
Okay.
completely understand what you mean. Like, it's that argument that you can't define something by using itself in the definition. And to that I say, crack open a dictionary, babe, because I can't tell you how many times I've looked up a word and it's like uses its own self to define itself, and then I have to go look up a synonym to understand it. But I want to be, and now you can hammer this home because I'm clear when I make this argument. I'm not saying that like woman is woman. What I'm saying is woman is a series of actions and behaviors. Like, and like identifying as something is an action. Like to state I am this is an action that you take. So like a woman is a person who does a lot of woman things cumulatively, including identifying as a woman. So that would be how I would address that personally.
Yeah.
And we get around that
Thanks.
fallacy too, because we're not leaving it as like womanhood just being a term without the ability to describe the components of that. Like if we were to then define womanhood, it's like we have like, what does it mean to perform womanhood, or like perform a like the woman gender? We can explain all the things that Lux had said, like the different components of gender expression, the different components of that particular culture's view of the role of woman. Like you can more specifically define it, like as you go. It just takes forever to get through all that. So if you say, well, womanhood defined by like these XYZ things, it's like, yes, you're using the word kind of in the definition, but you've also defined what criterion are needed like for that specific word. So I think we kind of get around that in that way.
Yeah. And genuinely, I want to a request that yesterday Matt Delahanty was on the line.
Mhm.
Yesterday Matt Delahanty was on the line.
Yep.
Yeah, he had the hang up yesterday,
Yeah.
last night. Yep.
Yeah. And I even commented it. And the last bit, the very last bit at when the last call ended, he gave one of the best definitions that those kind of videos that whenever someone asks with this gotcha question, we open and show this. See, this is the thing. I genuinely will like that if you get it, and if you get it clipped, it's one of the best ones.
Yeah, we'll
Yeah,
let
I'm
Artem
sure
know
it
to
would.
make sure to get that clipped
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, and before I'm done with my topics, and before going, I just want to say a bit that I believe with today's situation, no matter at the West and even East and wherever part of the globe we live, every person of the LGBTQIA plus community should learn how to debate. As I believe it's it's maybe forcing them to learn something, but it's kind of something that we have to learn just in order to exist in this conservative world. That's the part.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
that learning how to debate has definitely made it easier for me to advocate for trans people. I just feel really bad that every trans person has to learn and be an expert on like 80 different topics in order to just move through the world. I don't think you're wrong, but I do think it's sad that we feel the need to do that. But thank you
Yeah.
so much for your call. We really appreciate it. If you have anything in the future you want to call back, please feel free to do so. Good luck out there. Yeah, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. Did you want to just like say anything last before we let you go?
Yeah. Learn debate, guys. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right.
Go do it.
Well, thank you.
All
We
of you.
appreciate it. See you next time. All right. So real quick, I just have to say it's Josie's birthday. And
Yay.
she doesn't get any of the votes today. I know she keeps being like, vote for me in chat, and then other people are like, so since you didn't get any votes, are you gonna be the loser of today? Make her come on and defend
Yeah, bring
a silly
Josie
position
on here.
just right at the end.
Oh, also,
Yeah,
Ben,
for sure.
isn't your birthday this month too?
No, mine's July.
July.
got time.
Okay. I need to like.
Mine is at the end of this month.
Okay.
Mine
Okay.
is around the
It's
same
locked.
time as Matt's is.
Right. I need to have like a reminder system to tell me when everyone's birthdays are, because I can't even remember my mom's birthday half the time.
Yeah. Well, we're doing super chats now. So get those super chats in.
Yes.
You get your votes in. Hashtag Team Lux, hashtag Team Ben. The loser has to defend a silly position. What is the silly position? The poll is gone for me right now. What won? I don't know what won.
I think Swords won. Yes. Currently, Swords is winning 44 to 30.
By a lot. Yeah. So today,
don't
whoever
mind.
loses
Sword.
has to defend the position that every trans person should get a state-sponsored sword. And I'm going to assert it needs to be custom made for the person so that it is perfectly balanced.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the silly
Yes.
position that we will have to defend at the end, whoever loses. So get those votes in, get those super chats in, and we will get into reading them. Do you want to start?
Yeah, I will start because I'm about to get on the board. We got $20 from YouTuber Grudge. Yay, you're on it. You're back, Ben. Honestly, been wondering about Ben. Good to see him and Lux today. Hashtag Team Ben. Hashtag sorry, not sorry, Lux. Yeah, I appreciate
That's
your
okay.
vote. Keep those votes coming. And yeah, I've been gone a little bit, but it's luckily because I still have a job. So maybe when I'm on here, like all the time, that's maybe when you should be worried that I don't have a job.
That's when you should be concerned. Like, Ben, don't
Yeah.
you have something you should be doing right now? Nope, it's 2 a.m. or sorry,
Yeah.
it's 2 p.m. in the middle of the afternoon, and actually I have nothing going on.
Yeah.
5 units. Thank you from Sean Isherwood says the Cantor set has Lebesgue pronounced Lubega. I am always doing this where I don't pronounce things correctly. Measure 0, but is uncountable. Its elements are as common as the real numbers. This is weird. I take your word for it. Again, you're making me spell. You're making me cast spells. I have no idea what I'm saying.
Yeah. This could be
but thank you.
absolute
We
BS and
appreciate
we'd
it.
have no idea.
Yeah. I'm just repeating like super demonstrably false things. All right, go ahead.
Okay, Mr. Borico's going to try to make me offend an
do the
entire
accent. I did
island.
it last time.
$20 from Mr. Boricua 10. British for Dr. Ben. Quite a beautiful start to the show today, innit? What you say we get a caller to have it on this chat? But never mind. Already ruined, bruv. Don't go banging your head against the bleeding desk, mate. No good. I sound
True.
exactly like Katie. I detect no difference in my voice, except maybe the pitch.
Except
I had a hashtag before Dr. Ben. Does that count as a vote?
No
if there was
no
vote?
hashtag?
Oh, no,
that one had a hashtag.
There is a hashtag.
Okay, that counts? Okay.
Yeah, hashtag.
Yes.
It's a vote.
Of course. Yeah. No hashtag, no vote. €10 from Sale says, just a little love from an ally. Heart. I'm on EU time, so I'll watch tomorrow at work. True. First of all, hilarious. Love that. Second of all, go to bed. What are you doing?
$10 from Sentient Tree. For once, I was proud of Montana for voting down the anti-trans bill, but the world is indeed terrible. Zoe Zephyr and SJ Howell are kick-ass reps. Also, welcome back, Team Dr. Ben, with a hashtag. Yeah, Montana keeps Montana-ing, and we've got some people working very, very hard to make them stop Montana-ing, but this is par for the course, unfortunately.
Yes, but indeed, shout out to Zoe Zephyr and SJ Howell who are holding the line and putting themselves physically, like putting themselves out there in front of everybody to argue for our rights. So hashtag Zoe Zephyr.
Yeah.
5 units from Mystic Minds Analysis Tavern says regular reminder that culture is nothing without humans to make it so. Art is part of culture, as is community. Use art to make better communities. Heart. Yes, that's so true.
Yeah.
Art brings people together. And also art is propaganda, and we need leftist propaganda.
We do, yes. $4.99 from Sarah Wilson. I'm playing Jedi Survivor. A mentor character, basically alien Danny DeVito, tells the MC, relax a bit, the galaxy can wait a few hours.
Mm-hmm.
It's a nice positive message for everybody. You're all good. In the voice of Danny DeVito, which I cannot replicate.
No, I can't do it either. I was like, what would I have to do in order to do that?
I'm not gonna
It would
try.
take a little bit more time than just now to figure it out. $10 from Brutus Magnuson. Thank you. Says the Tangerine Tyrant posted a crossed out pink triangle. Yeah, stay motivated. We have work to do very soon. We have work to do today. Do the work today. Don't wait for tomorrow. But yeah, it's troubling. That's a nice word for it.
$5 from Monkey a Typewriter. Geez, Ben, you dare try to fulfill your obligation to service to this country? Too bad there aren't a bunch of support our troop folk trying to help. Yeah, for real. It's like they get mad that people aren't joining the military, and then, when the wrong people are in the military, then they're mad about it. Like, make up your mind. Do you want a military or not? Like, honestly, classic. I mean, the thing, like, you kick out all the trans people and like they're not going to want to come back for the most part. So you are kind of permanently alienating people and your recruitment is going to get even worse. So have fun.
True. $5 from Frankie Nolt says, I can't watch for very long, but I wanted to give you a vote. Hashtag Team Ben. Guys, come on.
That's my cousin. That's my cousin.
Oh, okay. Well, okay, that one doesn't count then.
No, it counts. It counts. I still get the vote.
We gotta get the hashtag Lux. You do get the vote. It's true. But come on, guys.
We do need some
I need
hashtag
at
Lux,
least one.
but I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying this a little bit.
The celebration.
Yeah. 5-6 from L. I'm having top surgery in 2 months. Congratulations. Also, here's a queer history book recommendation while I'm at it. Before We Were Trans by Kit Hayam. Hashtag Team Ben.
I'm doing like a read one book a month thing this year, and I'm gonna have to, yeah. Nice. I'm actually about to read Ursula Le Guin. That's my next thing on my list, but thank you for the rec. $5 from Alice Rosa said random, but I've sent chats before of worries with my brother being a Marine. I think hashtag Dr. Ben said he was in EP, and I just remembered he's stationed there too. Hey.
Yep. Buddies. Everyone who lives in the same city is automatically a buddy. That's how this works now, apparently.
That's true.
$5 from Haley Geringer. Really happy to have you back, Ben, and I wish you all the best for your continued service. But Lux has lost 2 weeks in a row, so sorry, but hashtag Team Lux.
Thanks.
Okay, fair.
I appreciate it.
They can have one. Although I've lost every time I was on with Lux, so I need a little bit of revenge, but I kind of feel bad for Lux a little bit.
It's true. I think that there is a bias that develops toward the hosts who are here most often. So like I always lose to Josie. Like consistently I lose when Josie's on because she's just been here for longer and people really like her and I'm like, all right, whatever, it's fine. Ballot stuffing, but whatever. Anyway, $5 from Space Barbarian. Thank you. Says, am I transhuman if I don't like identifying as human? Because gesturing at everything. Ugh, hashtag Team Lux. I voted for Ben last time. Transhumanism is a fascinating philosophical concept that I learned about most recently. I watched like the Abigail Thorne's Philosophy Tube video about it. And it's really interesting, the idea that transhumanism is just using any technology to change something about yourself. So if you really stretch the definition, technically like taking anti-anxiety medication is a type of transhumanism because we're using the technology of medicine to change something about ourselves. It's a really fascinating concept that I really recommend people look into because philosophy is cool.
Yeah, for sure. $5 from Trayton. How to respond to that argument that homosexuality is mental illness based on biological reproduction? I know the argument is wrong, but I'm curious. I mean, there's a lot of misunderstanding on what constitutes a mental illness. And it relates to like distress and dysfunction, and homosexuality in itself is not distress or dysfunction. I think people may use the argument that if you're not reproducing, then therefore you are dysfunctional, but then that argument expands to anyone that is not reproducing, so that kind of falls on itself.
For sure. Also, the DSM took it out as a mental illness. So it's like, how far back do you want to roll all of this like research and progress? So $5 from Ari Turner. Thank you. Says, super happy that the Colorado anti-trans bill to block gender care for minors was defeated in committee. The GOP rep cried afterward. Hashtag Team Lux. Fucking losers. Yeah. Anyway, good.
Yes.
Like, why are you trying to do this shit in Colorado anyway? Like, this is the thing. If you live in a blue state, I just moved to a blue state, you still have to hold the line because they're still going to try to do this shit in a place that you feel is safe. So there's no complacency here right now. But also, haha, you cried, loser.
£5 from Ian Roche, whatever it is. I'll say it both ways. Thanks for the call. By the way, it was me that dropped the Brendan Lee Mulligan quote on Blue Sky. Haha. Views on Montana bill defeat and Zoe Zephyr's speech. I was not.
It was on my. was on my
Yeah.
blue sky. By the way, and also just for you, Ian, Brennan Lee Mulligan just did a Wired video, and boy howdy, he still drops the nuggets. Like, you can tell he's a leftist through and through because it just comes out when he's talking about normal stuff. Yeah, he just like Brennan Lee Mulligan is apparently like an anarchist, which is great. He's already cool, and now he's cooler. Do we have any opinions on the Montana bill defeat and Zoe Zephyr's speech? I mean, I'm like, I respect her so much, and I feel terrible for her that she is in that position to have to do that. Like, that they're trying, like, her own coworkers, her colleagues, her peers are out there trying to make it illegal for her to use the restroom and calling it a sex crime. And like, I find that so disheartening, but I'm so proud of her, and I'm glad that she has the support she needs personally to continue doing that work, because I find it just very impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my thought on that, like, as much as we hate that it kind of is this way, like, I want everyone to be safe and secure and be able to take their mind off things and be able to, like, detach when they need to, but also with the knowledge that somebody has to be on that front line. Somebody has to be uncomfortable. Somebody has to go through that in order to hold the line. And Zoe Zephyr and many others are doing that, and they understand that somebody has to be on the chopping block. And like, as much as I don't want it to be that way, I'm very impressed with what they're doing and how they're handling all of it. So, mad respect.
Yep. Was this
I
one
think
mine?
it's
I
me.
can't remember. $5 from DaCosta. Happy birthday,
yeah.
Josie. #Team Lux. Thanks. We appreciate you. Okay, now you.
$5 again from Monkey a Typewriter. I'm just picturing Ben in dirty scrubs on a corner with a sign, "Will perform physicals for food." It's like the Scrubs episode. Love when we get spicy Ben. #Team Lux. Gotta respect the bit. Yeah. Yeah, it's the
Yeah,
trend
in that
where
Scrubs
they say
episode, don't they go
compliment
work at
me
a
and
like
then
free clinic or something?
yeah,
Okay,
something, I don't know. But either they're doing the thing again where they compliment me and vote for you.
that's true. Yeah,
That's what the joke
it
is.
happens to me too. $5 from Marceline. Thank you. It says, need both Dr. Ben and Lux to advocate for swords today. Happy birthday. #Team Josie. Same as L. Ron Hubbard. Interesting. Yeah, let's get Josie in here so she can do the loser thing.
Yeah. 2,500, whatever those units are, from Helios. #Team Ben. Ben gets a welcome home vote. Lux can get a vote when they, sorry, Lux, it feels weird to say, convince Forrest to like cats. That seems like a tall
I'm not mad,
task that Lux doesn't get
but
a
I'm a
vote
little mad.
until you convince Forrest to like cats.
I know.
Yeah,
Terrible.
harsh.
It's you can't
All
help
right.
people who are wrong and determined to be wrong.
Yes. Okay, that was the last vote. Also, I don't know if I would normally put up a super chat that's like, oh, using your correct pronouns feels weird for me personally. I didn't really read that before I put that up.
Yeah. Y'all, if you
in
feel like it's
hindsight-
dehumanizing to use its pronouns, let me tell you, it's way more dehumanizing to have someone not use the pronouns because they've decided arbitrarily that they don't want to. How is that functionally different than refusing to call a trans woman she, her pronouns? It's not, but whatever.
Yeah.
We did get one last minute from Monkey at Typewriter that was for Lux. Lux still losing.
Yeah, still loses. That's fine.
Yeah, I love Brennan Lee Mulligan, and he's absolutely a self-described leftist. Anyone who sees his anarchist halfling character can attest. Oh, and then another one came in for me. So that one's irrelevant. All right, I'm going to get your thing queued up. You guys want to vamp for a minute?
Okay, I have to defend the premise of
Lux,
swords.
I got my revenge finally. I have won in the room with Lux.
I know.
So
How
I
dare.
know it's a bad
proud of you.
stretch for Lux, but I'm happy that I got this one win. So I know that it's not just bias against me. That's what this confirms. So basically I can't come on the stream ever again and say it was bias against me.
Yep, there we go. Problem solved. Yeah, you gotta win some and you gotta lose some. I feel like if you're not here that often, then you definitely, like, it's good to get it every once in a while. And then if you're on more often, then you can lose more and win some, and then it won't feel as bad as just losing every time.
Yeah, it's fair enough.
All right.
Yes.
Are you ready?
Sure.
Okay. Charging up the clock here. And 3, 2, 1, go.
So there's all these rules around, what weapons you can carry in public, right? It's like your knife has to be shorter than whatever. Okay, we're body shaming people with big, long knives. Okay, whatever. And you're allowed to like carry a gun, but you're like not allowed in a lot of places to carry a sword, which I find problematic because listen, sword lesbians, number one, but also sword trans people, sword trans lesbians. This is like peak human interaction. Like I want to see all of the trans people out there with like swords, okay? And they have to be not only state funded, but they have to be state funded and custom to each person. Because what the fuck is the point of a sword if it's like too heavy for you? You know, if your fighting style is you use a rapier, but somebody gives you a falchion, that doesn't make any goddamn sense. So they have to be custom, and it has to be given to you. Okay, whatever. I will accept that you have to wait until you're after 18 on this particular issue. Like, let's say you're trans, you come out as a teenager, you get the hormones that you need when you're 14, you don't get the sword until you're 18. That's reasonable. But as soon as you turn 18, you have to get the sword. The state is mandated to do it. Because wouldn't society be better if you were a little bit afraid of crossing the wrong person? Let's not forget that a historic trans man who would threaten people with a gun when they would misgender him out in the old Wild West. The legacy lives on through the sword. You must pledge yourself to the life of the sword. And, I just think that it would be aesthetically better. And along those same lines, let's also bring back cloaks. Let's also bring back those funny pouches that your dick goes in. You're wearing really tight tights and then your dick goes in a little pouch up there. Let's bring that back. Very stylish, very cool. And swishy dresses. They're not very practical, but it would look very cool with a sword on the side of it. So, hard to argue.
I think Lux could have done like 10 minutes on that. I'm not going to lie.
It's
there was momentum.
Vamping. I can just go forever. Yeah. But thank you everybody for your votes. Thank you for your super chats. Thank you for hanging out with us for those couple hours. We appreciate y'all. And don't forget to check on the shows next week. We have like so much more programming every day of the week, practically, sometimes even on Fridays. Not this week, but sometimes. So yeah, do we have any last words before we close everything out?
No,
Codpiece, thank you.
Yeah, the codpiece.
That's what I was looking for. Yeah. Join the Patreon. You can support the show not only here on the live stream, but you can support the show on the Patreon, where you get access to cool stuff, including the Discord server, and you get your name put over here. And the list just gets longer and longer. There's like custom stuff over there. You can see things before they come out in public. And wouldn't that be great? Support the production of this show. See you next time.